if you haven't done it in training, you will not do it in a race.
Yeah.
It's that simple. No, you just got to put the hours in and then it all comes together on race day.
Right.
Well, you know what? It doesn't. It doesn't.
I'm going to say that today's guest is the world's most versatile professional endurance athlete. His name is Cam Wurf. This is a guy who has distinguished himself at the highest, most elite level in 3 distinct sports. First, in rowing, where he represented Australia in the 2004 Athens Olympics. But then he turns his sights on professional cycling and over the years becomes a super domestique for Team Sky and now Team Ineos. He's famous for not only leading Team Ineos to victory on the cobblestones of Paris-Roubaix last year, but celebrating that win by going out and running a half marathon right after the race. He can set bike course records at the world's most prestigious Ironmans, and he can even run a 2:45 marathon after a 2.4-mile swim and a 112-mile bike.
If I'm capable of dreaming something, then it's possible. An athlete can do anything. I don't really believe that you can dream something that isn't possible.
Cam doesn't ever seem to get tired. He absolutely loves training. He's always smiling. And I just got so many questions. Final note, we recorded this episode quite some time ago, all the way back in February. So since then, Cam has bookended an impressive slew of races for Ineos with a podium at Ironman Lanzarote. And it seems he's just getting warmed up. So strap in and let's do it. This is me and the great Cam Wurf. This episode is brought to you by Timeline Nutrition, which is this new skin health line of products. Check it out and get 10% off your first order.
Today, a couple of guys met us for a ride. One guy, Belgian guy, works at the Rafa shop. I can't remember his name, but I feel terrible because he rode against me in 2001 at the Junior Worlds. He was in the Belgian 4. And going into it, we'd done a couple of lead-up junior. We were the 2 top-ranked crews. Everyone was like, who's going to win? And we're in the semi-final, and we're on the start, and we're in Germany, and one of those random storms, like, they have those sirens on the end of lakes in Europe, and like they know that something's coming, and so they warn the siren, and it goes, and next thing, this thing just like rips through. There's white caps everywhere, and stuff getting blown all over the place. One was coming. And our coach could see it. And he was trying to get my attention because I was in the stroke seat of the boat to like pretend I'd broken something in the boat to get a delay. And I was like, he's waving, I was like, he sort of ignored. Anyway, sure enough, the race started. We got about 100 meters and boom, this thing hit us. And we were all quite small, like 150-pound kids. And we're racing Romania, Belarus that were, 300-pound men, probably with fake passports. And sure enough, like they just sat back and leaned into it and just plowed through this storm and, made the final. We missed out by 1 spot. And the same thing happened to Belgium in the next heat. And, in the heat before, because they'd hit it towards the end of their race. And so we ended up both in the B final, but we beat them in the B final. And he reminded me of that, we should have been 1st and 2nd that year. I was like, yeah, well, we were 7th and 8th.
So this Belgian guy who works at the Rafa shop, he used to row again. Yeah. Is that like the first time you've seen him in 25 years then, or whatever?
Yeah, it was 2001. It was 22 years ago.
Wow.
And not only that, but I'd done some efforts before he arrived. And I mean, they weren't hard. They were like some zone 3 just efforts. I was doing around 410 watts. And he said, how do you feel, at your age? Like he's obviously working. I'm still in different sports. And I said, you know what? It's funny. Like even when I was rowing and we'd get on the bike, like if you could do 400 watts for like 20 minutes at, 70 kilos, 150 pounds, that was a pretty solid effort. I said, well, mate, 22 years later, it still is. That feeling has not changed. And I said, I can't even believe I'm still doing it. But, I am, and I apply myself the same way I did 22 years ago.
Right.
I just love it. I love exercising.
Yeah. And you're 39?
Yeah.
No, 39. Right? But you're still improving every year.
Yeah.
You had a couple, during COVID, you were sort of angled for a peak performance, but there were no races.
Yeah.
But you've bounced back and you put in your best KONA performance this past year. It
Yep.
just so happened to be an incredible field, and all kinds of havoc broke loose with, not just the Norwegians, but Sam Laidlow.
Yeah.
You improved on your bike course record by 3 seconds.
But he demolished me.
But, it was almost like I was watching the live stream and you were barely brought up in the whole conversation. It was insane.
Which is, that's how you want it. When I took the record, I took it off Norman Stadler, who had stopped racing, centuries ago. And Sam, what impressed me most was I was there and I was powerless to do anything about it. I was, in admiration and of what he did as much as everyone else watching. I think, I was really pleased for him. He's a lovely guy at the end of it all. And
that was his first KONA, right?
That was his first KONA.
And the Norwegians, their first KONA.
Yeah.
To come in their first time out. And basically rewrite the rule book
completely,
where there's all this lore about how you can't do that, right?
Yeah.
And they're just like, I don't care about that. Like, I'm just going to go in and crush, and they did.
Yeah.
How does that? For somebody who's been so enthusiastically pursuing a win at KONA for so long, does that now feel daunting? Like, it's definitely a seismic shift in where the sport is headed.
Yeah, not really. It's kind of getting towards the level I assumed, you'd want to get to, and I've been aiming to get to. And I thought about this on the drive out, like thinking back, through what I've done. And I've forgotten who it was you had on here, but it was a guy talking about Ironman Canada, and he didn't get to read his speech that he planned to read.
Gordo Byrne.
Gordo Byrne. Yeah. I listened to that. I was running in Maryland. I remember my wife's family's from over there. I was in the middle of nowhere, I had the podcast on. And I guess it sort of resonated with me because I've never feel like I've been able to empty the tank in an Ironman. And through a range of reasons. The first time I won one was in 17 and I'd qualified for KONA a few weeks before in the last qualifying race. And we'd already planned to do the Ironman Wales because it helped for the next KONA to qualify. So we bugger it. You may as well go anyway, just do some training anyway. Sure enough, it was a horrible day. I was miles in front of the bike. I was basically able to walk the run and win. And great. And then obviously came to KONA. That was when I first broke the bike course record and kind of established myself in the sport. 19, I won twice. The first one was in Port Macquarie, and it was the first time I could run properly. So I was running quite well. I got nervous halfway through because I was running quicker than I've ever run. So I started eating too much. So then I had to slow down because I had stomach cramps, So that I still won, but it was nothing. Then I did Ironman Italy later that year, and I was ready for KONA, but it was 3 weeks before, and we basically did it to test a new bike. But I was sort of so far in front and felt so good in the first half of the run. It was like, I may as well finish it off.
The gas.
But yeah, I took my foot off the gas, but still run 2:44. I think I went 7:45 that day. And then KONA was 3 weeks later. And while physically I think it was maybe still a good decision as far as training goes, what we didn't counter was it's on the other side of the world, travel. So by the time I had a few days off before Italy, I traveled to the other side of the world, dealt with jet lag, dealt with different climate. All of a sudden you get to the start line and it was like a month since you've trained, and I was fifth, which was a grind out. It was the best result I've ever had, but I finished it going, gosh, I think we got that a bit wrong. Anyway. And then of course we had, Copenhagen in 21, we had COVID then, COVID hit. So Copenhagen in 21, great rate, miles in front on the bike, had Lionel quite a ways behind, 10, 11 minutes. I was like, okay, this will be fun. I just watched Kipchoge win gold at the Olympics in the marathon. I love the way he just booted away from everyone. So I'm going to go nice and slow. And then when Lionel gets within, 30, 40 seconds, I'm just going to ping it. And he caught to that, 3, 4K from the end. So then I just went for it and put 5 minutes into him. It was quite comfortable. And then KONA got cancelled.
Right.
And so
you feel like, basically the point being that you feel like you've never been able to drop the hammer and have the race that you're capable of having.
No, the one I've envisaged having. And then finally this year with KONA, I had the chance to train until the week before. I felt like this was going to be the moment to finally get it all out, and then, it just didn't happen.
Right. Well, you shared with me something just before the podcast about what was actually going on. That I don't know if people know about that.
No, I haven't said anything because you don't want to make an excuse. And it's not an excuse. It's just, it's amazing how it was COVID, and I got sick 3-4 days before I started noticing it. I think, as people know, I'm a bit of a nutter for training. I love training, and that last week is the worst week when you're not meant to do much. And I found myself not doing much short. It was very uncharacteristic. Couldn't sleep properly. I knew there was something wrong. I was taking paracetamol, whatever. Anyway, I was like, look, if I can be on that start line, I'm going to be on there. And sure enough, I raced. I was off the pace. I was never able to get into the race. I was quite achy and didn't. It was a real, another grind. And the result was what it was. And a couple of days later, the team, sort of encouraged me to do a test because they were, we had a carer there at the race, Marco, who had sensed there was something a bit up. And sure enough, I had COVID, and I was negative a couple of days later. And I guess the thing for me was I'd been so diligent for that whole period because with the team and the bubble, you can't, go outside. Like I'd sacrifice swimming and running and stuff at races, which I was meant to be able to do as preparation for all that time to make sure I didn't get anyone else, risk getting anyone else sick or bringing it into races, and never had COVID. I'd done hundreds of tests, maybe thousands, And then when it was finally my chance, like it was finally my moment, I guess I got over there and just got so excited to be amongst it all, and I'd never had it. So I guess I was maybe a bit more susceptible. I'd trained really hard. I was probably really on the razor and it got me, and afterwards you're like, initially after the race, I was like, well, there was a real tough pill to swallow. Obviously, what Sam did, what the boys did, I wasn't even part of the race. I didn't even feel like I was involved. Yet I was still 11th and went 8 hours. I didn't really know. I was sort of, I guess, blow cycling. Let's just get stuck into this again. Let's just focus on one thing. But then when I found out I had COVID, I was like, well, you know what? That's not that bad. And
it's encouraging actually. It's a weird thing because you go 8 hours, you break the bike course record. I mean, that's a phenomenal effort.
Yeah.
But you had to go under 8 hours to break the top 10.
Yes.
It was just an unbelievably fast field. But then to discover, even if it was a low grade version of COVID, that you were competing with COVID.
Yeah.
Once again, you've been unable to be at your best when it mattered most.
I think I said to you, like I ran with the Norwegian guys a couple of days later, and that was sort of when I figured it must have been something, because Christian made a comment of how good I looked. He was running like he could barely move, and I was...
Yeah, but looks are deceiving with that guy.
True, very true. But he was just so stiff and sore, he could barely walk, and he said, you don't even look tired. And I said, well, to be honest, I just didn't feel like I could get out of first gear all day. I just wasn't in the race. I couldn't get to you guys. I couldn't be a part of it and didn't know why. And it was that night that I did the test. And so of course... I was disappointed. I really wanted to fight back quickly. I was negative quickly, which meant that I'd probably had it some time before the race. So it had probably been affecting me for longer than I realized, or I'd been able to ignore, and wanted to do another race at the end of the year, Arizona, Israel, Cozumel, something, just to really have that big tank empty, And I tried to get back into training, and just every time I tried to train, I'd just get sick again. So I was worried about chronic fatigue. Fortunately, it wasn't that. I got some advice that said, you just got to rest. It's not smart to do an Ironman with that virus. So you read to, and hope that you haven't done any damage. That was the big thing for the team. They were worried about your heart and did quite extensive tests on me once I was healthy. And I seem fine. And to be honest, now I feel fantastic. I'm able to train at a level I haven't trained at in the past. And it's just hopefully that me getting COVID was the end for everyone. That was like the page turner for the rest of the world. We can all move on now.
Okay, good. Thank you for giving the world permission.
I took one for the team.
Okay, that's good to know. I mean, when you say the team was concerned or the team did this, you're talking about Ineos, which is the cycling team that you compete on behalf of. So just to kind of create some context for people who don't know who you are, you compete for the world's greatest cycling team, the most successful, most dominant professional world tour cycling team.
Yeah.
You also compete as an individual, as an elite Ironman triathlete. And you seem to do this with it appears relative ease and parity. Like it's not as if one is a side hustle and one's the full-time job.
Yeah.
They're kind of equal footing. I feel like you have perhaps a greater passion for Ironman, particularly Kona and triathlon. But it's the stability of being part of this team and perhaps the camaraderie and the kind of foundation that provides you and your family and also your training to kind of, root you in something so that, you can do all these other things as well. Like it's a complicated puzzle, I'm sure, but you're the only one who's doing this.
Yeah.
I think you're the only one who's ever done this, right? I mean, there was Talansky, but he'd stopped. He stopped and he was a pro cyclist for Slipstream for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, right? Yeah,
long time.
And became a pro Ironman. But you're the only one to try to do them simultaneously. Yeah, and as far as I know.
Yeah, and I my big goal, last year, for example, 2021, was to win a race and win an Ironman, and I was able to do it or be part of a winning team, part of a winning, like guys winning. The first year, 2020, I was never part of a win with the team. We had a bunch of seconds, even second in the Vuelta with Richard Carapaz, like it was a great fight with Jumbo Visma, but didn't win. And then so 21, I was like, right, I want to be part of a win. And thanks to Tom Pidcock, had his first win and I was there for that. And then obviously Bunch followed that. And then I won in Copenhagen, and then last year in 22, part of more team victories, but didn't quite, I couldn't win one myself. I was second in the one Ironman I did, aside from the World Championships in Vitoria-Gasteiz in Spain.
Right.
I got beaten by 30 seconds. But, that was, to your point, they had me actually the week before, was the Tour de France started the weekend before. They had me in Copenhagen for some VIP, stuff, but also COVID was still quite rife, like just in case, if they had to throw me in, I was there. So I obviously wasn't there preparing for an Ironman. And then when I didn't get to race the Tour, it's like, wow, you got to qualify for Kona now. Okay, there's a race next weekend, off you go. So rest home, threw all the stuff in the car, off I went. And I almost pulled it off. I actually had a pretty good swim, good lead on the bike and was nursing myself through the run and got caught in the final part. But I've learned that the guys are very, very good in both sports. And so I need to be more, I'm not sure what the compartmentalize, I mean, that's mental, but basically dedicate myself specifically to each, at certain times to do it properly, because otherwise I just become okay at both. And I don't want that. Like I can go to a bike race and do my job for the team and, G and I had this conversation in training the other day.
G being Geraint Thomas. Tour de France champion.
Yeah, he's out here training with me. And it was, if I'm on the front or, protecting the guys or helping them for 5K longer than we thought, that's great. If I'm there for 5K less, they work it out. It's not really, it's no big deal.
Make or break.
It's me that knows whether I gave it all and actually made a big difference or not, like me personally. So when I don't do a good job, if I have been, kind of doing too much running or whatever, and it's affected me, racing on the bike, it's actually a loss, because racing on the bike provides an amazing opportunity to push my body way harder than I would like to, because it's one of those sports where you just have to go as fast as the guy in front, which is something I feel can be a weapon to take back to triathlon. And periodically I've been able to get that right over the last few years, but not consistently. And so, and a lot of that has been because of this whole COVID thing with the bubble. I haven't been able to go swimming. I haven't been able to go to the hotel gym and go for a run during the race. Just a small, even just a small one, just enough to keep, as you know, with swimming.
The swimming thing has got to be tough, right? Like you're in Europe, you're doing these races. You're not, you're not going to find a pool all the time.
No, and swimming is the one you need to keep the feel for. And so for me, just being able to get in the pool, even just at the end of the day for a kilometre or two, it would make a massive difference to having 10 days off, because otherwise you tend to go home and it's like you're starting all over again for someone like myself without a swimming background. And anyway, and so again, I was thinking though, but it's bizarre because even on a bad day, I still swim with like, Lionel or Sam Long or Kinley or these guys. And but I don't actually that's when don't even get to train,
I know, it's insane.
So,
it's insane that you can, basically the way that I envision it, and it's probably not like this, but it's sort of like you're in Europe doing whatever you're doing with the team. And you're sort of on standby as a domestique or a super domestique. You don't always know if you're going to be enlisted to do this race or that, which makes it difficult for you to plan your race schedule with respect to triathlon. It's kind of a standby thing, right? So you're always sort of training, but not really sure what you're training for.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, well, I'm going to scoot out and do this Ironman, and you parachute into some race after not having swum at all.
Yeah.
But somehow you're able to stay in contact with the lead group out of water.
Yeah.
Like, what is going? I mean,
the best bunch skills. One thing you get from cycling is bunch skills.
The craziest example, maybe there's a crazier one, but the one that struck me was I get all the dates confused, but right before St. George, you're at Paris-Roubaix, right?
Yeah.
Paris-Roubaix, like the most insane, brutal one-day cycling race there is.
Yeah.
And you're, on the lead out in the cobbles, basically blazing the path for the team.
Yeah.
And really set the team up for a win.
Yeah.
And then you basically split from there and drop in on St. George.
Yeah.
And lead that race on the bike.
You
basically towed Christian the whole way and set him up for the win.
Yeah.
But the fact, you didn't even think that you were going to be doing that race, right? Because you were supposed to be doing something else for Ineos.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you weren't even really preparing for that.
Well, I actually had to go to Africa the following week. So it was like, can I fit it in or not? And I decided last minute, well, I can, so I'll go. So I came here, then I went to Namibia and actually another corporate bonding thing they wanted me to do over there. But, it's funny, like back to when I stopped, I was doing a similar role, and Peter Sagan was my teammate at Cannondale. And I guess I was 30, 31. And I was like, wow, my productive years are like, this is great. I'm a domestic, in a big team and blah, blah, blah. But I don't want to waste my productive years doing this. So that's when I moved to the US. I still had a contract, fortunately, with Cannondale, which they honored, and gave me a bit of time to, find what I wanted to do. I really wanted to work in finance. I met a bunch of different people in that field, and finally found, a place I wanted to work down in Century City with a real estate investment firm. Mosaic was just sort of starting out, and anyway. I was there for a little bit, starting to study, and Ethan, the founder of it all, he said, why would you could be in sport, do you want to go back to rowing? Do you want to go back to cycling? I was like, no, I'm really happy doing this. And I'd done a couple of triathlons for a bit of fun. And so I said, but I enjoy this. And as only an American would, he said, I used to live in Kona. He said, you can beat those guys. I used to watch that race every year. You're better than them. And I'm thinking, mate, I've done a couple of triathlons for fun. Like, only an American would say that to you. And so I kind of, I took one seriously. It was Arizona as a pro. I said, if I can get off the bike, quicker than Jan had set the world record in Roth, the swim and bike combined, I'll think about learning to run. And anyway, it just sort of snowballed from there. I was able to do that. I just hobbled through the run. I didn't even bother training for the run for that one. It was all about the swim and the bike. I went back to Australia for a bit of a break, before I'd come back, and I thought I'd just get into finance. We got a random call from Chris Froome to do some training down there because he was holidaying. I thought, why not? And
If you're a Gen X dude like me, then skincare can feel a little indulgent, but I actually wish that I didn't wait until my 50s to take care of my skin a little bit better because hey, it's our largest organ, it's essential to health, and it's our first line of defense against environmental aggressors. The fact is, as we age, our mitochondria generate less energy. So anything that you can do to boost these little power plants is absolutely huge. Timeline's worked it out in their nutrition products, and now they figured it out with skincare, cracking the code with this new product called MitoPure, which is a patented version of a postbiotic that they've discovered helps rejuvenate mitochondria and promotes healthy skin. It's backed by 15 years of clinical research. They've got 3 products, the day cream, the night cream, and the serum. I've been testing them and using them. I'm really enjoying it. I do think my skin looks better and it looks more refreshed. It feels more refreshed. And you should check it out. So to get you started, Timeline is offering 10% off your first order. Click the link in the description below and use the code RICHROLL to claim the offer. All right, back to the show. just so the audience is clear, let's like really establish what exactly happened here, which is essentially that you start out as a rower. You grow up. You're from Tasmania.
Yeah.
You go to the Olympics in 2004.
Yeah.
In the lightweight double scull, right? Yeah. Olympian. Yeah. Right. Pinnacle of sport for anybody. Yeah. Somehow you reinvent yourself as a professional cyclist, and then you spend how many years? Like a handful of years as a pro. You bounce around between a couple teams, but you're on Cannondale Liquid Gas. Like that was like the main team you were on, right? Yeah. And from what I understand, there was some sort of discontentment around like, how the whole kind of like pro cycling thing operates, and you were feeling dissatisfied with that and kind of hung it up. Yeah. And that's where the finance thing came in. Yeah. So you're thinking my athletic career is over. Yeah. The boss says, get the fuck back out there. What are you doing? Yeah. And you do a couple of triathlons and you go back home and you're riding with Richie Port, one of the greatest cyclists there are. You're training with him. Yeah. In Tasmania. Yeah, in Tasmania. Yeah. And then he goes on to win Tour Down Under shortly thereafter, right? And you kind of set him up for that. Yeah. You get this call from an old rowing coach who's now a cycling coach who's involved with Sky. Yeah. Who's like, come ride with Froome. Yeah. The guy at the moment.
He just won the Tour for the third time.
Right. Yeah. And then you set him up for more success.
He won all 3 in a row after he started training with me. Yeah.
You're like the go-to guy. Like if you want to win a Grand Tour, you got to call up Cam because he's the secret weapon. Yeah. So now it's Port, it's Froome. Yeah. And now it's Geraint. Yeah. And these are the top guys in the world. And these guys choose to train with you. You're the guy they want to train with. Yeah. So the question is like, what is it about you? Why is it that they want to spend, all these hours, all this time? Like what are you contributing to those guys? And what are you getting out of that is nourishing for you, but also nourishing for them and creating all of this success?
Well, I guess the big thing is we're not competitors. I've always been friends with a bunch of guys from other sports, like Jimmy Johnson, for example, NASCAR. I've learned so much from him, and he asked me so many questions. I guess because it's not confrontational. He knows I'm not going to get in a car, or I might get in a car, but I'm not going to drive as fast as him. Likely, I know he's not going to do an Ironman as quick as I can. And the same with these guys, they're training for something completely different, but I guess the endurance element, there's a company part, I've got a lot of stories, so I can fill in a lot of blank time. So I think the guys enjoy that. But I've always been very good at training, and that was part of why I quit the first time, because I could train. I know like the best in the world. And I know now because I'm still training with those guys, but I could never race like that. I didn't figure out the sport. I just didn't know how to apply that.
You were training to train just because you like training.
I love training. I love exercising. I call myself a professional exerciser. And so, that was the thing. I went and trained with Froome there. It was obvious that I still had a bit under the hood. So then they were like, listen, you want to come back to cycling? I said, no, I'm interested in triathlon. Okay, we'll support you with that. So, obviously spent some time with Froome in 17, then 18, Geraint wants to win the Tour, and he was thinking about coming to LA because I'd told him during camps the previous year how great it is here. Yeah. So the team said, Cameron, can you go out and train with him? So, sure enough, fast forward, he wins the Tour that year, and it was just...
You should get like bonused for that.
You know what? The thing is, and this is what Chris said to me, in 17, he just won the Tour. And in between the Tour and the Vuelta, which he obviously won as well, we were in Chatel training, and we'd had a great camp. And at the end of that, I had one last crack at qualifying for Kona. That was in Sweden the following weekend after we finished that little camp. And the last thing he said, he said, you don't have to do anything more than you're capable of. Just believe in yourself, mate. Like you belong at this level. And so training with these guys day in, day out, you wonder why I think I can just you'd think I could do that going to, I'm not sure what's a great example, but maybe the Malibu Tri or, the El Segundo local triathlon. Like it's one thing to do what I do and then on the bike and then go and jump into that. But I think, I'll go and race Roubaix and then I'll go to the World Championships. And I don't even think about it because I'm surrounded by these guys,
Right.
you know, at this level.
The best
the best of the best. And I've really never known any different. It was the same in every sport that I've done. You know, I've always been surrounded by the best guys. And and I guess it's nice that I've finally found a sport that I'm competitive at, and it is all about me. And if I think about sort of what's happened in the past few years with the team, like you said, there's no schedule. And I don't think that's worked as well as we thought, because the idea of me coming back to the team was I'd be at a training camp with the guys. I'd be maybe stronger than a lot of the guys on the camp. And it's like, God, wish we could just take Cameron, you know? And I'm like, well, you know, I'm happy doing triathlon, blah, blah, blah. Dave eventually said, listen, we'd really like you to be on standby. And I thought, well, that sounds great. But
Dave
Brailsford, your team manager.
Right.
But the problem sort of that eventuated the last few years was then I was all of a sudden getting called into everything, because it's like, oh, Cameron's free, is he? Oh, we'll take him. Oh, Cameron's at home. Oh, great. Well, he can come and do this. And all of a sudden I don't get to train properly. You know, I kind of, as I said, I go home and I'm restarting my swimming, I'm restarting my running. You know, there's no real consistency of blocks. So to be brutally honest, the last couple of years, I haven't really felt like I've been able to put the work in or perform at the level I've wanted to in either sport. It sort of hasn't been quite like it used to be, you know. And so now the team have said, right, what are we going to do better this year? And they're going to limit my racing ideally to one race a month. So I get the time to train, you know, train with the guys, push myself, you know, get called into a race to fill a gap and whatever. And hopefully finally get to marry these two, you know, sports. Because I love doing what I do now with the guys, but I think that's because I get to go and do my own thing.
Right.
You know, I get to go
all that all the time.
I mean, the pressure, like KONA, I mean, regardless of why I didn't perform, it's all on you, you know, and that there's nothing that can help you in that feeling. You are all alone, you know. If it's great. You get to feel all that. When things go, I just now feel like, you know, I almost wished I wasn't on the team, because a lot of it was because I felt like I let so many people down. You know, I mean, I did what I could, but I felt like I let all these people down. I felt horrible. And now, you know, I wouldn't want that all the time. Like, to be a leader in cycling and then have to go and do that. Yeah. That would be pretty intense.
Well,
so it's a nice balance.
You answered the question that I had, which is, you know, whether you, in the back of your mind, you think, maybe I should let go of the pro cycling thing. And if I just went all in on triathlon and could get those consistent blocks in with the swimming and the running and give it the focus that it deserves, you could, you know, like, how much better could you be? Right. You must think about that.
I do, but I also, in my mind, I picture doing it the way I'm doing it. I just haven't had a chance to do it. You know, like, I'm going to the UAE next week, and like, I know there's swimming pools at every hotel. We stay on the water a lot of the days. So, you know, the way I see it is, great, I get to race at the highest level of cycling. I'm going to be physically, you know, cardiovascularly pushed. I just need to go and find some water to flop around in for 30 minutes just to keep the motor pattern, to then apply that fitness to swimming, you know, the week after when I go home. You know, there'll be a treadmill. I'll be able to go for a run. You know, it's like a 1 week training camp with a cycling focus. And then when I go home, I can switch it back into, you know, and honestly, the level of pro cycling now it's like Ironman. It is so high. Yeah. I mean, people say, what's the biggest difference when you came back? And you got to remember, I didn't race for 6 years until they convinced me to go back again. And things changed a lot. First thing that was funny was I just had cycling socks on, you know, regular cotton, whatever, you know, like, because that's what you always wore. I got to the start line of my first race and I looked around. Everyone has aero socks on. Every single person on every single team. And I thought, wow, that's different. That's already a change.
Yeah, and their cycling is, they're sticklers for their etiquette when it comes to kit.
Yes. Yeah, so I definitely stood out. But the one back in the old days, it was much more controlled. You know, it was more of a gentleman's agreement a lot of days. So there was a lot of days that were pretty cruisy. So it's just like base training all the time. Pretty much. Yeah. And I used to, you know, you chat away to your mates you hadn't seen. You know, I was on an Italian team, so you love seeing Aussies and whatever. I don't talk to a single person when I'm racing now. It's so intense. I mean, back in those days was like, right, we all take it easy to the feed zone, we all get some food in the tank, and then we race the last half of the race or the last third, and but now it can kick off at any moment, a bit like triathlon. Someone can make the break at any moment and you don't know if they're going to come back, with the likes of Wout van Aert, Van der Poel. I mean, they just have, and Sagan, started to, but he was sort of on his own tangent. Now there's a bunch of guys like that. And the races are just so unpredictable and exciting,
Well, I heard these stories. I don't know if they're true. Tell me if they're not. That in the midst of stage races, like after a stage, you would go running in the middle of these races, and then on one day classics, you would like work out after the race.
Yes, yeah, no, I have. I mean, the other day I raced in Australia, and we finished the race, and I put my shoes on. It was 22K back to the hotel, so I ran back.
And what are your teammates?
Yeah,
what did they make about?
They really scratched their head, And it's not that I've saved energy or, I'm not tired. Of course I'm tired, but I'm also conditioned to do that. And it's also, and another thing that I'm really proud of is, and not for me, but the respect that the guys have for the sport now. I think they respect me, for my role in the team and even in the sport. I know that other teams, other riders, they give me space. They respect me in the peloton. And they now talk to me about, the Norwegian guys, about Laylo, about the women, Lucy. I mean, they ask me questions, like they always thought, oh, the triathletes, they're just okay at everything. They're like, well, wait a minute. No, because this guy just led us on the cobbles in Roubaix and most of the field's already been dropped. And then he goes to an Ironman and he's sort of one of the best, but he's not, exactly. He's not like, head and shoulders above anyone. And these guys then get off and run too, so like an appreciation for the sport of Ironman.
That's a huge shift.
It is, because you've had people like, you mentioned Andrew Talansky. I mean, he tried to do it and came in. I mean, he never even qualified for KONA, never even looked like qualifying for KONA. And it's not because Andrew is not a phenomenal athlete. But, I mean, G and I were talking about this as well the other day. G said, yeah, well, maybe you are actually good at this sport. It's not that the sport's easy.
That's funny. Well, what's interesting is the parallels between what Brailsford has done with British Cycling, Team Sky, and Ineos looks very similar to what Olav is doing in Norway. Yeah. By, really kind of like engineering the sport to a whole new level through data and testing and Brailsford's whole thing of marginal, what is it called? Like
marginal gains.
Yeah, marginal gains. And like what do the guys think of that? I know it gets mocked and all of that, but like he really did, revolutionize British cycling and created the most, dominant team in recent memory.
Yeah, we talked about that at the camp about, creating a team, like a great team. The book Good to Great. It's like, it's a great team. And people say, oh, how do we? And it's like, well, it already is, because it's not only, there was whatever the 8 tour wins, but it was, or 7, I can't, a lot. And, but there were 4 different guys.
Yeah.
And also you plug someone like me in there. Okay, I'm not winning the tour, but I'm having success in another sport. Like, that to me is a great organization. I mean, and if I look at it from my perspective, one of the biggest things was when I was getting supported just in Ironman, how hard all the staff work. I go to a camp and, everything's there, and you just, that culture, like the way Dave chooses the people to work there, chooses the riders, everyone's working their backside off. And that filters through to your training. You go out and train, you're like, well, I'm not going to sandbag today because I can see all these other guys, Tim Kerrison, the coach, like our version of Olaf, like he's there every day following us,
I mean, there's just a commitment to excellence across the board.
Exactly.
So you feel compelled to show up for that.
Yeah. And back in the marginal gains was not like the Norwegian, like the science so much, there was no lactate testing or no VO2 testing. We actually never do any of that. And I will say, like, unless you know what you're doing, don't do it. You're better off working hard. But it was like chefs. It was, mattresses, pillow, things to help you sleep, investing heavily in massage therapy, the best carers, etc. And but also I think listening to him talk and then comparing it to Tim, like the way that he kind of, he's close, as in it's like, like a fan, really keeps an eye on them, very much a part of their lives, but obviously needs to keep a level to be able to tell them what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that is identical to Tim Kerrison. Like he was always there. He's been a part of all our lives. Like we've all got married, we've all had kids, like he's been, a part of all that. Yet when the time comes, he knows when to say, you got to go and do this, or come down on you or whatever else. And also that most people don't want all those good guys challenging them. The good guys want to be, but he created that environment where it was normal for Geraint or Froome or Richie Porte to be like proving they're stronger than each other.
Right.
Yet
nobody's king for more than a day. Like nobody's resting on it. Like normally, typically, historically in pro cycling, like if you won the Tour or, you can be expected to be the leader the following year. And my sense is that that's not really the case.
No.
And perhaps, that must have caused issues or friction with, Froome and Geraint at times and not knowing who is the team leader and all of that.
Yep. Oh, absolutely it did. I mean, obviously there was Bradley and Chris, which was a big one. And then obviously when Geraint won, I mean, Froome was peeved, like he and
even this year for Geraint, not sort of, it just feels like he's not being accorded the respect on some level.
Yeah. I mean, it's not exactly,
it's
not
what he's
even
done. I mean, he just got third.
Yeah.
And he's not going to race the Tour this year.
No, he's off to the Giro. Yeah. So, I mean, partly a bit of that might be his choice, but again, it does come down to, well, okay, we'll have to go back to the drawing board and see how we're going to try and win it, and in any other team, performance would be ruthless. Wow, you got third, right? Okay, that's built on that, try and get you back to the top.
So it's a tension between, that kind of like ruthlessness that comes with, performing at just, the absolute next level of everything.
Yeah.
But also a big part of the success has to be the esprit de corps, like creating kind of a, that team unity. I feel like that's a role that you play and probably why, a big part of why they want you around. Like, you're a great exerciser or whatever, and you're a great super domestique, but my sense is that like people like having you around and you make the team better, not just by your performances, but also by your personality. Yeah,
I mean, there's a few things personally I've always thought, like, a player that makes the team great is as valuable as a great player. And I always in rowing wanted to be the worst guy in the boat because that meant that everyone had to be better than me. So then we had a great crew. And same on this. I love being number 30 because the harder I train, the better I am, better 29 other guys have to be. But yeah, Tom Pidcock sort of nicknamed me, CMO, Chief Morale Officer. Because, and I think that like Roubaix, for example, is a great example. I mean, I wasn't meant to do it, obviously. The team was hot, they were winning everything. And all of a sudden they decided to send me in. I don't know who it was that made that call. Thought, wow, let's bring let's put
the triathlon on the triathlete on the front to lead us onto the cobble section.
I remember, I went in and I did a race during the week, and I thought I was going for that, and the team won that. Magnus Sheffield won that, and then they had the team for Roubaix, and then they, a couple of days later, they said, "Oh, Cameron, maybe just stay a couple of days, just do the recon, just in case, And I was like, oh, why not? I've never really seen those cobbles. I'll go and check it all out. And
you'd never done that race before?
I'd done it in 2010, but it was a long, long time ago. So, and back then, you had tubular tires and, aluminium rims, and very different, bikes. And it was a very different memory apart from being very painful. And so it was I was intrigued to see sort of how it all worked now with tubeless tires, disc brakes, completely different. Anyway, so I went and did the recon, and then, they came and said, listen, we'd like you to race if you're happy with that. And I said, well, I got nothing else to do on Sunday. I may as well. And so, you come in and it did. I mean, I guess it provided a different spark. Like the team had been so hot, they'd been winning, but how do you sort of keep it there? And as it turned out, I mean, that was the last race we won that spring. So who knows? Maybe someone had sensed, look, I don't know, the drive is sort of maybe just a bit, we need something else to change it. And I kind of feel like that a lot when I turn up, because I'm not meant to necessarily be part of the first picked. But when they throw me in, it's like a different conversation at the table. The guys all seem genuinely happy to see me there. And it's like a player coming off the bench, isn't it? And sometimes they can change the game. Exactly, a pinch hitter. Like they come in, they can change the game. And I don't want to bump my own horn or pat myself on the back, but I kind of feel like I do have that opportunity to play that role in this team just by having a good attitude.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we're all good athletes. We're all pretty similar. There's not a big difference between anyone. We all train the same. We all hit the same numbers. We're all basically the same weight. We're on the same bikes. Mike Riley says it the best, doesn't he? There's so much stuff out there in sport and life that you can't control. The only thing you can control is your attitude. And I just try and make sure that it costs nothing for it to be a positive one.
Yeah. Well, you definitely have a positive attitude. And I imagine the fact that you can go off and do Ironmans and then come back to the team keeps it fresh for you, and it doesn't start to feel like a slog. Because those Belgian winters and it sounds brutal.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of it. Like it's sexy, like, oh my God, Grand Tours and all of that. But the day-to-day of being a professional cyclist, especially when you're not, a Froome or a Geraint, it's a hard life.
Yeah, well, I went through that. I went through the part of you think you might become it, and then the realization that you're not. And you're just one of a good team, on a good team, and yeah, it's lonely. It was hard to meet anyone. Your lifestyle you're all over the place. And I'd had enough. And I'm glad I had the courage to just say, listen, that's fine. I'm just not cut out for this. I'm not good enough, to be where I want to be. And I want to put my effort into something constructive with my life. And and back to that story about, Ethan, who I was going to work with, he's actually been to KONA every year, obviously, to support me, Wow. So that's been a really nice... The job
offer is still like an open door, right?
I was actually in there. He raised that fund. They sold that fund, and then he's doing one more. And I actually spent the day in the office with him on Tuesday with the new team. He'd like me to be in, this one, because obviously who knows how long I'll compete for. But I've always wanted to work or do something in that world. And he obviously is one of my biggest supporters. He wants to see me try and win KONA. So he's not going to say, listen, come and get in you got to strap into that chair. We'll put a bike under the chair, under the desk, and you can pedal away. Obviously, sport's still the focus, but he's given me the opportunity to come in at the foundation part of a new fund, which is, quite an opportunity with some great people and just have something different going on in your brain. I'm 39 now. You go to a race and the guys are, some of them are talking about Pokemon, for crying out loud. Like it's a different generation, and it's nice to have, I'm going to read, I read a lot of books. I've actually just started reading yours and I read a lot, as much as I can. And, now I'll just be reading some, real estate, financial reports.
You're going to pull a Simon Gerrans.
Yeah, pretty much. It doesn't matter if you're motivated and excited about it. I think that's the most important thing, and continue to learn. Life's about learning, isn't it?
Well, I think you got a lot more to do in sport, and we're going to get to next chapters in a little bit. But while we're here in the present, in what you just shared, what struck me is the fact that on the one hand, you're arguably the world's greatest endurance athlete from a versatility perspective.
Yeah.
The fact that you've done what you've done in rowing, cycling, and triathlon, it's pretty extraordinary. The only person that comes to mind that might challenge you for that crown is Sheila Taormina. Do you remember her? Yeah, or you're too young probably.
No,
but
I was just thinking Born to Run, that sort of word, but it's not that.
No. This was an athlete who competed in 4 Olympics in 3 sports.
Wow. Okay.
Swimming. I think she won a gold on a relay, and then triathlon. I think she went to two Olympiads in triathlon, and then she competed in the Olympics in modern pentathlon.
Wow.
Which is like where you
Yeah, do everything.
Horse riding and you shoot a gun and that's
fencing.
like a totally different thing, right?
Yeah.
Which is pretty fucking badass. I don't know if anybody's ever matched that, but in current times and certainly in present times, like to me, you wear that crown and yet at the same time, you're still like not the best at any of these things. But what I see and what I think is really laudable is a very conscious effort to always be surrounding yourself with people that are better than you at what they do.
Yeah.
And so you've had this incredible career where you're like in the company of the world's greatest in the things that you love the most. And so I guess the question that I have is like, what is it about those people that make them special or different? When you look at Froome and when you look at Geraint and Richie Porte and these guys, like, is there a commonality? Are there themes across the way that these individuals operate that distinguish them from the others? Because as you said, like everybody weighs the same, everybody trains just as hard.
Yeah.
Certainly there are genetic differences, et cetera. But from perhaps a mental perspective or just a level of professionalism that they bring to what they do, like what have you learned that has helped you level up as an athlete?
Well, I guess it really... Well, it hit home seeing it, but if I can just briefly bring the Norwegians into it, and it's something that I'd actually done for a long, like these marathons they'll do the weekend before, I mean, I often did those sessions. Everyone laughed at me, it was like, you can't do that, blah, blah, blah. Obviously they come and do it, then they perform. Now, where I'm getting to that is if you haven't done it in training, you're not going to do it in a race. And what I saw when I started training with Chris was that, I'll give you an example. We're in Chatel at that camp in between the Tour and the Vuelta. So he's just won the Tour in pretty great shape. I've never seen him train like that for that 3 weeks. He just was flying. He'd recovered well from the Tour for a week and then he just got back into it. And Tim loved devising a race simulation type effort. And it was often a climb followed by a section that would then lead to a final climb.
At a period... in the year where most people are taking a break or doing base training.
If you're doing the Vuelta after the Tour, you're like, look, I've done enough training.
Yeah.
I'm just going to absorb it and I'm going to get to the Vuelta and I'll be nice and fresh and I'll have some strength there and I'll probably do very well. Not for me. And so he's devised this workout. We went and he's like, right, Chris will do this climb. He's going to do it at threshold. So you wait at the top because you'll get dropped. So I went up ahead and then there was like a 10K pretty flat section, sort of false flat. He said, now you're going to go threshold there and he's going to be on your wheel. So he gets a break, but he doesn't really get a break. He's still going to be around, 300, 350 watts just holding your wheel. So keep the pressure on. And then we're going to chuck a right and we're going to go up this brick wall, like 20%. He's going to go up there flat out because that's the finish. And it was to simulate the first mountain stage in the Vuelta, which happened to be actually in Andorra where I live. So now I do that climb all the time. So anyway, off I went. I went ahead and I'm waiting for Chris. Tim comes up in the car. He's like, right, he's coming, get ready. So get ready, get in the right spot, got him on the wheel. We're coming and, we're coming along a road and a main road and it's about to intersect the major road. And it's just like, all we had to do was sort of, come onto it, veer onto it and then go along about 300 meters and he hit this other climb. And next thing, we're a K or so from that point and Tim goes past and we're like, yeah, whatever. And we get to this road, this intersection where we better look for cars. And there's the Team Sky car blocking the traffic. Like he has parked this thing in the middle of the road, like right in the middle. You could not, there's cars parked up and he's standing on the other side like this, like a policeman stopping people. So we just ping it straight through this intersection, these cars honking and hollering. I keep towing through me, he chucks a right, goes up this climb and I creep up it at my own pace. But it's an example. It's an example first. You've got a guy here that is so good, yet he's prepared to put himself through that in training still. He's just won 4 Tour de France's.
Right.
And then he's gone through and done this. And obviously then you fast forward a couple of weeks, first stage of the Vuelta, what happens? He didn't win the stage. Nibali won because it actually had a descent. Nibali got back and got him in a sprint, but Froome went into red and never relinquished the lead. He blew the rest of the field away. Nibali had already lost time. And I was watching it on TV just going, okay, here we go. Yeah, okay, now he's going to do this. Bang, you did it, you know. And then obviously with Geraint, then after that, you know, it was, and even, you know, with Richie as well, when we'd be back in Australia with Tim coaching him. Yeah, there's just been so many examples of like this simulated work that, you know, they go to a race and all they have to do is, you know, there's always been this talk of the Sky Train. You know, we were in Tenerife and we all lined up, and that was before I was on the team. That was when I was just training with them, and I'd have my spot in the line. Often it was the first guy. Sometimes I'd be stronger than a few of the guys on the team, so I might be 2 or 3 back. And it's the full lead out, you know, and then you have at the end, you know, Froomey or G or whoever, you know, racing it out to the top, you know. And that was common, you know. Tim Kerrison would improvise that, which is exactly what Olaf does with the boys, you know. It's if you haven't done it in training, you will not do it in a race. Yeah. It's that simple. Yet these endurance sports, I think forever in a day, you'd be very hard pressed to find people that would be like, yeah, I'm going to go and do that, because it's like, no, you just got to put the hours in and then it all comes together on race day.
Right.
Well, you know what? It doesn't. You know, it doesn't. So
well, that's a lesson.
Is that a good answer?
I think that's a really good answer. I mean, basically, like the short version of that is they're not fucking around, right? And they're very intentional about everything that they're doing. And
am I allowed to bring a swimming one? A swimming story? Yeah. It's a bit controversial. So that first time I trained with Chris, that was when we decided. Tim Kerrison said, you know, you want to come back to the cycling. I said, I'd like to do triathlon. He said, okay, well, we got to teach you to swim. And you got to remember, after Tim had been a rowing coach, he went to swimming, and he was with the Australian Olympic team in Athens and Beijing. And then he went to British swimming, and then that's how he ended up in Team Sky.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Wow. So all of his friends were from a swimming background.
Like perfect for you.
Amazing. Yeah. So I've trained with Chris, you know, and then on the last day, he's like, right, I'm going to drive. He lived up on Mount Tamborine, which is about 40 minutes from the beach. And he's like, right, I'm going to take you to my friend swimming coach. I rock up to Dennis Cottrell's squad, and Sun Yang's there. So I get in the pool, you know, and I haven't swum really much in, you know, years. Like it's just like, it was like something we were thinking about doing. And I'm swimming with him. So that first year when I'm in Australia, I get to go along and train with Sun Yang. Anyway, one night he was doing 200s. And on the last one, Dennis said, right, watch this, you know, he's going to go out pretty hard. He'll have a look at the clock with 50 to go, and he'll decide whether he goes for it. And he swam like a 146 something, you know, like not far off the world record at the time. But you just saw like he got to about 30 meters from the wall. You know, he'd obviously had a glance at the clock to see, and the kick and the water just went freaking everywhere. Okay. And I know Sun Yang's not a great, you know, there's obviously been the controversy about him, but it's the same principle. And swimming is, I think, one of the best examples of it, as you know. Like those guys, they're breaking world records in training. They go to a race and they know they're going to do it. And I just think in endurance sport, there's been some of these outliers that have been prepared to put themselves through that, because it's a bit different than hurting yourself for a minute 46.
Right.
You know, Christian and Gustav have to go and run a 2:40 marathon.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing.
It's a bit of a different thing.
You're like this weird Forrest Gump type character where you're like, I got to learn how to swim a little bit. And then boom, like, you know, the most elite person just appears in your,
it was the first person's feet
like everywhere you go. Like the people show up that you need to like kind of get you to the next thing. Like it's a weird series of happenstances that have kind of created the lattice work of your career.
Yeah. And Bradley Wiggins once said to me that, you know, until you've got everything lined up, like everything is perfect, your team, your family, your support, you know, network, everything, don't even bother putting everything into it, because you'll never be as good as you could be. But once you've got that, you've got like 2 or 3 years, and make the most of it. And, you know, I've had to build my way through another sport, you know, pick and, you know, and another, like the swimming obviously is a bit my Achilles heel, you know, in the sport of triathlon, as you know, the dynamics of all that changes a lot. All of a sudden, like a Magnus Ditlev, you know, he can swim quite well, he can get to the front, he can apply his cycling. You know, if I swim well in a race, I'm normally on the front foot, and it's up to me to kind of lose.
Right.
If I swim poorly, I don't, like what happened in Kona, I'm not even in the race.
Yeah, which is, I mean, that's new. It used to be you really could get away with not being a swimmer. You get the wetsuit on, and it just coddles the non-swimmer.
It does.
And, the gaps, the swim's not long enough to really be substantial in terms of making a big difference. But now you really have to you have to excel in all three. Like, you can't get away with it anymore.
No. And one big thing was in Andorra, in 2018, we had a 50-meter pool that shut it to repair it. Spent 2 years renovating it. And then they had a fire. So it just reopened. And it's saying something I've been waiting for. It's like, right, once that pool opens, I can get into my swimming. Once that pool... Yeah. Anyway, finally now it's reopened. So I've got a wife, beautiful wife. She's doing a master's, where she was until she had our boy at the start of COVID. But she's almost finished a master's in holistic nutrition, leads a fantastic lifestyle and keeps the fuel tank, as perfect as she possibly can be in the house. Great support. Little boy, I got this support network of the team, and now I got Brett Kirby at Nike that does all my running. Who obviously is involved with Kipchoge and everything else. Mm-hmm. And now I've got my 50-meter pool.
The sub 2.
The original one.
Yeah.
The original one. So he did all that. And then, of course, he was part of the Ineos the second time around. Not as much. That was more Ineos.
What is it with Ineos that they're just, best cycling team, Formula One, Kipchoge.
Yeah. Yeah. Jim just wants to win all the biggest events.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's like stuff that he loves Africa. That I think is a lot of, with Elliot and they've expanding that. So that's fascinating you bring that up, because Elliot, he's like, we've got all and I'm actually due to go to Eldoret soon. We've got all these guys that are great runners. They can run a 204 or 205. They'll never win the Olympics, but they've got amazing engines. They might be great cyclists. So he said to Jim, how about we invest, and I think Elliot invested in it too, in a cycling academy. And so they've built this center up there next to the running group, and they're going to see if they can develop.
Pretty cool. Yeah, I've heard a little bit about that. I think that's like really cool.
Yeah, and when they get injured and they can't run anymore, why waste this engine? You're talking about some of the most phenomenal athletes on the planet.
Right.
So Jim certainly loves Africa and is fantastic. He supports in that way. The America's Cup thing, they've never won that. That's like a real
the other one, right?
opportunity for him to, fund something and back something that, brings that to Britain that they'd never had before. And then obviously he's got his passion in, in soccer, in football. He's now talking about buying Manchester United, etc., involved in the All Blacks, the cycling team. But he's just passionate about sport. And I think he was a big Brexiteer, and moved to Monaco and was saving a lot of money in tax. And he said, well, you know what? I'm going to invest all that in sport. He literally has invested billions in British sport. And so, it's we're all very fortunate to benefit from that.
Yeah. In thinking about, what makes you different, like what your distinguishing talents are. Your willingness to suffer and your love of just, getting out there and getting after it, like with just unreal consistency is a big part of it. Yeah. And in thinking about that, I start thinking about like rowing and like what you learned as a young person as a rower. And then my path in swimming, like I think even though like rowing and swimming are very different sports, one thing that they share in common is that they're like workhorse sports. Like they're sports that reward you for putting in a tremendous amount of work and volume. Yeah. And it's kind of insane because you literally train like almost as much as like a tour cyclist for races that are anywhere from, 19 seconds to 3-5 minutes. I don't know how long the longest ones in rowing are, but they're not that long,
6
right?
minutes, yeah.
But you develop this capacity to, push yourself very hard, and you develop that kind of engine that then becomes applicable in these other sports. Like you can kind of, use it in different ways, and you're the shining example of deploying it in different ways.
Yeah, I even as a 17, 18-year-old, I used to have 6-hour Saturdays, and we'd go rowing in the morning, I'd go home, maybe 90 minutes, I'd go home, do some weights, and maybe an hour, and whatever I had left, I did on the bike. And so, at that age, I'd be on the bike for, but rowers, it's one speed, And so every single Saturday, you just come home barely making it. I mean, you're cross-eyed. You have no idea how to fuel yourself and nutrition and whatever else. So that's actually not a great habit to get into. You know, it took a while to learn that's not smart, because then the next day you're destroyed and you cannot train. But absolutely, I mean, in rowing, people ask what your favorite, what was the hardest or whatever. And I always say, well, they're all pretty challenging, but rowing obviously gave me great foundation, and I think like swimming, to have the dedication to train for that many hours, knowing that you're going to compete for such a short period of time, it kind of makes what I do now, like half the time I feel like I haven't done enough. Like you go for a run like today, you just, you ride for 4.5 hours, do some efforts, and go for a run, do a few efforts for an hour, and you feel like, oh gosh, but I got to run a marathon when I race. Like, is this going to be enough? Whereas when you're rowing or swimming, you're
There's
always
no question.
You're always
so
way
beyond
overboard.
that.
You're like, why on earth are we doing this again today?
Yeah, I still think that. I still think there's a lot of craziness.
Yeah, but then the great thing with rowing, like it really does touch every part of your physiology, but particularly that anaerobic capacity, obviously, and that's all. If you've got that, it's easier to build the other end. It's if you got the hard part, it's like then the base is the potential for the base is so much bigger, and so that's what builds a VO2. I mean, it was like funny, the guys talk about their VO2 being smaller, as far as doing Ironman as opposed to doing ITU, and it was very interesting to watch mine. Like, rowing was here, I started cycling, it dropped back, and then as I got better, I progressed it a bit. And now, it's sort of fallen a little bit, but to be honest, not a lot. I guess maybe I train a bit, in that zone, maybe more than most guys still, because I'm used to it. I don't know.
At a higher zone, you mean?
Yeah, potentially. And
you did have a little flirtation with ITU at one point.
Yeah, right? very brief.
So you must have boosted it back up for that.
Yeah. Well, I did some hard running and everything else, but that's just another sport. I mean, what those guys do, it's groundbreaking. It's but having said that, if you come from it, you've got the muscle memory. I don't have it. I was trying to develop it at like 36, 37. Something that I'd never had, running that quick or swimming that quick. But I thought, well, if I'm a good triathlete, I should be able to do it. It wasn't the case. And it's fascinating.
Because you're going in reverse. I mean, most of those guys, you start with the speed and you build the endurance on top of that.
Yeah, which is like I said with
endurance
rowing.
And going back, trying to go back to the fast.
Yeah, but it just blew my mind, like how you can, and that I believe I'm pretty good at Ironman, and can be so bad at that, when it's still swim, bike, run. So, I won't do any more.
The various like body composition changes that you must have experienced by, being in these 3 different sports has got to be super interesting. I was listening to you talking with Garrett on his podcast about some changes. Like, people think of you incorrectly as just this, pro cyclist, world tour, obviously, excels on the bike leg, but they're not appreciating the fact that you can run a 2:44 marathon. Like you're, and running, there's still so much room for you to improve, because it just doesn't get the attention that it deserves. And I know that you're shifting that with what you're doing with the Kipchoge's coach and all of that. But you were talking about how when you really started to double down a little bit on your running, that you actually gained muscle mass on your legs, where you would think going from cycling legs to more running, you're going to slim down and get actually leaner. Yeah. I mean, it's a bit like rowing. I was quite lean then, and you build muscle, but then when you become efficient, because I look at Alistair, leans out.
You lean out. I look at Alistair Brownlee, he's like a rake, or even Sam Laidlow, he's quite fine, but they swim so you think, how? And I, in swimming, I'm kind of, I've come into the sport, my lats have come back, my back has come back. But when I'm swimming well, I finally start to, trim out a bit, because, I get more efficient in the water. And the same thing when I had to really apply myself to running back at the beginning of 19, where I was first doing those 100K weeks, I just actually got heavier. I just kept getting heavier and heavier, more muscle mass. And then when I finally started getting on top of the training after a few months, then they fine down again. And so I've always remained around that 70, 72 kilogram marker, but the sort of weight just has kind of shifted. Obviously when I went to cycling, it was very similar. You built muscle on the legs and obviously you lost it up top and then you fine down on the legs as well. So I was able to be a bit lighter then. But now when I came into obviously triathlon, as soon as you start swimming, your body's like, wow, I need muscle. So it grows. But I'm starting to get to a point I feel where I'm getting more efficient and I'll start to sort of lean down, which is how I'll get myself to the optimal composition to be able to do the optimal race that I dream about doing.
Right. You have to be in this, but you've got to be in this state where you're able to excel as a cyclist and a triathlete at any given moment, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not an idealized state for either of them. You have to find a way of like merging those two things so that you can.
I have to accept that I'm going to be as good as I can be in cycling. To me, Ironman is the priority. That's the one I want to win at. And fortunately, I can turn up to a bike race and contribute. I'm good enough that I'm better than a lot of guys that do a similar role without really having to do anything specific to do that, and to try and then utilize that to benefit the Ironman. And at this point, I probably haven't quite seen it. Having said that, I've ridden some pretty quick bike splits and run pretty well the past couple of years or few years. But I thought it'd be easier, obviously, but I think COVID's kind of changed everything. My first race back, I did the race in Australia and then I ran 30K afterwards. And I thought, wow, this is going to be amazing. This is just going to be the most perfect, like hard brick sessions. You do a hard race, you're on your hands and knees, and then you got to figure out how to run. And then
you
when
get
I get
that opportunity to run on really tired legs.
Tired legs, like that's like a real privilege, like it's something my peers don't get to do. And if I can train myself to do that, getting into a race, no matter what happens, I'll be ready for that. I'll be ready to absolutely bury myself if I have to get into it, and then or be prepared to try and put them under pressure, knowing that, I know I'm taking the edge off you, but that's going to bring you close to my mark, so I can actually race you now, even though I know you're a better runner. I'm in it now. I got to believe that it's the right thing because that's what I'm faced with.
The differences in culture between triathlon and professional cycling are significant on some level. Are they not? Like, with the exception of the story you just told about Froome and pinning that climb. Yeah. There's a lot of 5 to 8 hour rides with coffee stops when you're a cyclist. It seems relatively laid back and at times maybe from a bird's eye view, not as structured as one might think. Yeah. Whereas triathletes tend to be, staring at their Garmins constantly and losing their minds over data points and, kind of perhaps not seeing the forest for the trees. Like it seems the approach seems very different. Like, how do you think about that? Or
fitting in the day. Fitting everything into the day is difficult. And I think that's another point you make about the guys. That's another quality those guys particularly have is, Chris. I've been with Chris on a general ride, 6-7 hours in Tenerife, and we've been going so slow we get passed by people with panniers on their bikes, like cyclotourists. It's like the day in between his hard day, and it's more like training himself active recovery. He's like got to be on his bike. He's got to recover because he knows a big stage is coming up. And then the next day he'll come down to breakfast with, one of those little gel shot flask things, but he fills it up with 3 espressos because, for his last, super threshold effort, he needs a booster. To him, it's like race day, So you're right. I mean, I'd say almost half the time cycling's pretty relaxed, pretty cruisy. And when the guys are like, oh, do you want to stop, whatever? I'm like, yeah, well, but if I don't get going, I mean, I got to get to the pool before it closes or, I want to run. I got to run before the sun goes down or, so I can actually make it to dinner. But as far as the technical element of it, I mean, it's strange because it seems to be on very different tangents, to me, the triathletes would worry about stuff that I wouldn't even think you'd need to worry about. And the cyclists worry about, numbers at a whole sort of different level because that's the level they race at. So to me, you'd think like worrying about, your efficiency at 300 watts or something, it's like pointless because I spend all my time with cyclists and it's like, that's sort of just a given,
Right.
I mean, in a
That's
race.
already taken care of.
It's already sort of taken care of. So, I mean, even in Andorra, I'm being the only one there for a long time. Jan's recently moved there and not that I've had much to do with him, but I'm really excited because Hayden Wild's moving there, and probably one of Christian's biggest rivals, and Gustav for the Olympics. And a great guy.
Basso lives there, right?
Sorry?
Doesn't Ivan Basso?
No, he lived in Italy. I used to train with him when I was at Liquigas. So where I lived in Italy, I used to train with him. But in Andorra, I mean, there's everyone, Tom Pidcock. I mean, we've got 20 riders from our team that are living there. Wow. A bunch of movie star guys, a bunch of guys from Jumbo. I mean, every team, Trek, Julian Alaphilippe. I mean, we've got, a bunch of MotoGP guys. It's one of those great environments, I guess, probably like Boulder was back in the day where you just, everyone's good. And, the days you sort of feel like, oh gosh, I'm a bit tired. I don't really want to do it. You just have to look around and see who's doing it. And you're like, well, I got to do it. It has that real feel for it. And so, I've never really fallen into the triathlete way of doing things. And I've never really trained with triathletes because of it, I think, because the odd time I've done a couple of sessions, like I've been with Jan or whatever, it is so different to how I do things.
That's always been the case for you though, right? You've always been kind of not necessarily contrarian, but pretty clear on a way of doing things that works for you.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily fit any kind of program or modality that anybody else is doing. Like, where does that confidence come from? Do you even okay, so you're working with the guy at Nike on your running, but do you even have a coach?
Yeah, not a specific
who's overseeing everything you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, Tim Kerrison, but they kind of had the whole breaking to the second time around between Nike and Ineos was there was Nike sort of didn't do it again because they didn't feel like, the reason they did the first one was to teach Elliot or to help Elliot believe that he could run that quick, and they felt the next time he would do it would be in a race.
Right.
So when Ineos came in and put it on, Nike were a bit blindsided by it, and there was a bit of funny feeling there, and I kind of got caught the crossfires with Kerrison and Brett, so they actually didn't correspond a lot. So I'm pretty much like an NFL team, like offense and defense. And, Kerrison's probably got the offense with the swimming and the riding, and then, Brett's stuck with the defense. And often in the NFL, I hear they don't really communicate either.
Yeah, but that's not great for you.
Yeah, it works.
It does.
I think it kind of pushes me a bit because, Brett's just purely there. How can I make you a better runner? Obviously he has an understanding. He sees what I do in everything else, right, and he has a picture of what I'm doing training wise. But often even Tim said, look, let's make the running the structure. So you tell me whatever you got going on with Brett, and then I'll build everything else in around that. And for me, I guess, like you say, when I was rowing, I hated just being the rower. I always wanted to be a bit different. I wanted to be the different one. That was how I got in my mind about one day wanting to do cycling. I was just going to change sports, and prove that I could do it. No, I did that. And then all of a sudden, I went through that. And now back in triathlon, it's like, well, I don't want to be like the rest. I want to do pro cycling too, like be a little bit different. And so I guess with everything I do, if it was like everyone else, I probably wouldn't like that.
Yeah. You've got like some kind of like problem with authority,
Yeah.
Somebody that has you pushing back. I mean, I guess what I'm thinking is, I've seen cases where in the triathlon context, let's say, somebody hires Jerry to be their swim coach.
Yeah.
And then they go out and they find a cycling coach, and then they find a running coach, and they're speaking to these three different people independently.
Yeah.
And those people all know that one discipline very well.
Yeah.
And they know how to get you great at that.
Yeah.
But if they're not communicating with each other, this is going to be a disaster because you don't have a holistic plan for how to be the best triathlete you're going to be, and you're going to get injured or you're going to overtrain or something's going to go sideways.
Go wrong. Yeah, I mean, fortunately, I've never really had any injuries. And, I think we made a pretty good impact on the sport. I mean.
Yeah. So, I mean, that just makes it all the more like, I don't know, remarkable, but also baffling.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it does baffle me too that we work it out. But like I said, I mean, it just means that they're only worrying about their thing. And they're all like, I mean, we're talking about the best of the best people here too. It's pretty easy to trust what they're saying and believe in it. And I think it also pushes me a little bit too. I mean, if you had one person that was worried, you just ran hard, so maybe we should back this off. Often it's like, am I going to be able to get through that ride and then deal with that threshold run? But you find a way, and if you look at where the sport's going now, I mean, even that race I told you about, earlier on that I had to qualify for KONA in Spain, like last minute popped in to do it. I think I went 7:52 or 7:53 that day, like just going through the motions. I mean, back in the old days,
That's
like
nuts.
8 hours was, like you said, now in KONA, I was 8 hours, which was almost never broken. And now there's 10 guys ahead of me. You've got to, to be competitive in this sport, you got to find a way to do it differently because no one's ever done what these guys are doing.
Yeah.
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 I mean, my best, time in an Ironman, when I went 7:45 in Italy, all of a sudden, a lot of guys went that speed. And until that point, and I love that. I love that people maybe watch me and they go, "Farrad, I can do that." And as a kid, and I think it came from this, I desperately wanted to go to the Olympics. And no one from my school had ever gone to the Olympics. And Australia isn't the most encouraging society. It's not like I said about Ethan, how you could win that race in KONA, even though I'd barely done a triathlon. No one in Australia would ever say that to you. It was more like, we'd never had anyone at the Olympics. You're too young. You won't make it. And obviously, that really drove me to make it like at a young age. So I was not far out of school. I obviously made the team. I was able to go back. And I didn't go back with my chest puffed out like, look what I did. I went back proud as punch that I'd been able to do it. But also to show the guys that, look, I was, as you know, I wasn't any better than half of you guys playing football and being on the athletics team or swim team or, rowing or whatever I was doing at the school, struggling through my grades. But you guys can all do this. And since then, my school has had an athlete in every single Olympics in 3 different sports.
Whoa. Your high school?
My high school.
In Tasmania?
In Tasmania. Yeah.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah. And it's
wow,
awesome. I love that, and so then, as I said, when I saw this, with Ironman, when I went 7:45, since then, it's sort of like been the marker that like a bunch of guys, like that's just what they aim to do now. It used to be 8 hours and all of a sudden now it's that. And I kind of feel like the guy that people believe that they could be better than, which is fine. And unfortunately, it often is the case. I wish I could be the best guy, but it's nice to do it in a way that makes, I think helps make the sport better.
Yeah. I mean, that was the sense that I got from talking to Gustav and Christian. Like, yeah, they went in and it was their first one and they laid it down and had these, historic performances. But to them, it's like they're looking at what didn't go right or what they could improve on. And they seem to be, I'm sure they're very proud, but also like kind of taking it in stride. Like, okay, well, we'll see what happens next year. Yeah. Now we know the course.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I mean, when people say how amazing it was and I was, a long way behind.
Conditions were great too.
They were, but when I look at it, I said, it's about where I would expect it to be, which is crazy. But I said, even the way I raced, as I said, I was obviously a bit on the back foot. I wasn't, quite there, but I kind of expected everyone to blow up, like on the run, like I'll just do what I did in 2019. I'll probably end up 5th. I started the run in 5th and these guys all ripped past me like they did in 19. Like I remember Alistair and Lionel running past and then they just blew up and I just trudged along and came 5th. This time no one blew up. They might have blown up a bit later on, but and obviously at the front they definitely didn't. And people are like, it's just amazing. I say, well, the course, firstly, the conditions were great. The course is not that hard. The course is quite a fast course.
Yeah.
If you have if you've got the level of conditioning. And if you think about, because of the Tokyo Olympics, one of the biggest talking points in sport has been is heat acclimation.
Yeah.
And to me, I just saw a bunch of people, and you had to watch the women as well, that everyone's just learned how to deal with the heat. So it doesn't affect them like it used to. Like Kona, that used to be the big thing.
Everyone's
you got to Kona
up. Nobody could get their nutrition straight.
No one will ever go their fastest or their best in Kona. Like it's impossible, because of this. And these guys, through science, but also through the age we are in sport with, different things. And we can talk about that if you like that are, the forefront now in moving sport forward, endurance sport. But heat acclimation is a big one, and those guys had that dialed. I mean, you got the guy that won in Tokyo for starters, and he's training with another guy. So there's two guys, knew everything about it. But if they know about it, of course, all those other guys, and me included, I did training for it, which I'd never done before. And so,
but those guys have Olav, and who are you looking to help you solve those kinds of problems?
Yeah, well, the team. I mean, it was funny because obviously we had guys that went to the Olympics. So Tim Kerrison had some protocols. I got a sauna at home, so I'd run in the treadmill, jump in the sauna. And to be honest, I actually didn't do much for Kona. I was doing a lot of it the year before when I won Copenhagen, when we thought Kona was going to happen.
Right.
That was the year.
That was going to be your year.
That was everything was on track.
Yeah.
And then it kind of, this last year was quite dysfunctional, and it just never got in the groove. But it was funny because Brett Kirby, I said, well, what did you guys do with Elliot? And he said, oh, well, we could send you his jacket if you like. Like they just sent him a jacket. He just ran in a jacket, and got warm. And that was how he did his heat.
Yeah.
But he didn't do that before, I mean, that was what he did for Tokyo. So that was like a big revolution in endurance sport, to be honest, which is crazy. But it was brought about by the Olympics. And obviously the guys and the girls took that to Kona, and now it's just a pretty fast course now, as it should be. You know, if you look at the and if there's no wind, you're going to see some of the fastest times ever in history.
The pavement's so fast. I've ridden that course so many times. I mean, if you get lucky with the wind, even the climbs don't feel that climby at all.
No, no one uses a small chain ring.
No,
it's
quick. Just watching it just looked like these guys are on the rivet like the entire time.
Yeah,
like there is no breather.
Yeah. Yeah, we're racing. And that was always my thing with the sport when I came in. It's like, I want to turn this into a race so it's exciting, you know? And when I'm racing, I feel like I'm always racing because I'm either behind trying to catch up, or I'm in front and I'm trying to get further in front. And then on the run, it's like, how do you try and win this thing? Seeing guys just bubbling along in the pack, and then they run through. I mean, there's a reason why I guess there's only a number of us that people talk about. Because we try and win it. We try and race the race.
Yeah.
You can be smart and, have a pretty good success rate as far as results go by, playing the game. But it's sport. You're there to compete. So I prefer to turn it into a race.
What's your sense of the state of the union when it comes to doping and anti-doping, as somebody who's, look, you're in the pro cycling world, the history of that is what it is. What does that look like now versus what it was? And what does it look like in triathlon, and what are the differences?
Well, in theory, we're governed by pretty much the same rules. I mean, cycling imposes a couple of extra little unethical things that, they can't actually test for, but you're not allowed to do it. I guess IVs is a big one. Not that we do that in triathlon, but after a triathlon, obviously in the medical tent, you can have one to rehydrate, etc. And it's not frowned upon. Whereas in cycling, you have to. But to me, because I started cycling in 2007, the end of the Lance, and then we had a period there with some crazy results. 09, Chera, Dennis Menchoff, DeLuca. I remember one Giro, it was just insane watching these guys sprinting against each other. And obviously a bunch of, scandals through there, Puerto, etc. The big thing that had to change, because if athletes want to cheat, they're going to find a way to do it. The guys that don't cheat are the ones that are most worried, because if something went wrong, we have no idea why or how to defend ourselves. But the thing that I saw was it became not acceptable in the sport to cheat from the athletes. You know, it was like, okay, we're going to keep an eye on each other now. And when you're doing the wrong thing, we're going to say something. And you see it. I mean, without having to say any names, you see athletes just disappear. Or when they get caught, they're not welcomed back the way other athletes are. You know, some athletes took a ban, but it's like, look, he's good enough to do it clean. He'll come back to a big team.
So let me understand. So basically what you're saying is when incidents occur, instead of it ending up on the front page of L'Equipe or whatever and becoming like a global scandal, you're sort of ushered to the back of a van and like,
no, like, I mean, if incidents occur, they're dealt with. I mean, if someone's positive, I mean, that's black and white, but it's more if people sense something and they're not discovered, you know, then you just see athletes sort of they're not getting caught.
Like they're not getting caught, but people around them know, and then they're sort of dealt with and dispensed with.
Exactly. And that's because, you know, you're potentially affecting 100 jobs. You know, I mean, I know Jim Radcliffe, for example, if there was some sort of issue with us, that'd be it. The team would be gone, you know, with just one athlete. I mean, a genuine, I mean, I don't think if someone accidentally had a protein powder that was wrong and whatever, but, you know, if it was someone got busted for EPO blood doping or, you know, something knowingly trying to cheat, I mean, rightly so, he'd be out of the sport. And I think that would be the case for most teams. So no one accepts that anymore. Whereas back in the day, I guess there was some sort of continuity amongst the processes and what was going on and what was required to succeed, to get the publicity, to get the sponsors in, and the cost of all that. And I think honestly in triathlon, it's, you know, certainly I've never ever felt at the highest level, you know, when you get to KONA, you know that you can't compete. You know, I mean, the level is like, wow, okay, I'm either good enough or I'm not. You know, and I think Ironman does quite a good job of controlling the athletes, particularly at the pinnacle. You know, I mean, you know, I've heard, you know, sometimes in other races there's some crazy results, but often those guys never show up to KONA. You know, or you know, and that's sort of fine. But I guess what I'm getting at is it's the athletes that have, you know. You can impose,
basically.
Which is how it should be.
A culture shift.
Which is a culture shift, which is, I think, is fantastic. You know, and that's
better than just the testing getting better.
Exactly. The testers trying to figure out how do we keep up, because let's face it. I mean, I've obviously never had an issue, and obviously, touch wood, I never do. I wouldn't, as I said, I wouldn't know why or how, but I remember when I went to Liquigas and they asked me my blood type. I said, I'll have to call my mum. And they laughed, you know, because that was obviously just after the end of like a blood doping era, you know, Puerto had blown up and I didn't even know my blood type.
Right.
They knew.
How would you not know that?
How would you not, if you were involved in that sort of thing? And so it's, I mean, so it's only the athletes that can really control it. And fortunately, as a collective, we've all decided to do it the right way. And I think that's, you know, very commendable.
And is your sense that the passports are effective as a deterrent?
Yeah, absolutely, as a deterrent, because there's definitely been guys that have fought it and won, and there's guys that have gone down. So you know that if there's something off, you could get done. So that's for sure a deterrent. I mean, personally, I don't think, this is a test for my passport. Oh, you know, because I wouldn't even know. You get tested often. So it's, you know, here, there, and everywhere as far as where your tests go, whether it's just a random or a passport test or, I mean, every test is recorded, but there's certain ones that are for your passport and not. I mean, when I rock up to KONA, they actually test me twice for some reason, because they test me for the cycling passport, which is different to what, you know, triathlon have.
Right, so you're doubling up on your testing.
Yeah, basically. I got done twice. I get probably done every year.
And the fact that you were an Olympic rower, like you've been getting tested for as long as any, you might be the most tested athlete.
For sure. I'd say 100% I am, because coming from Tasmania too, there was, I think, 7 Olympians that year, and I was the youngest. and the atoms, so the whereabouts system, which was quite broad at first. It was basically like, where do you live? Great. Okay. And you put that in a system and they might find you. Obviously in Tasmania, it was pretty easy for the lady to find me. She went to school with my mum and the whole, she'd pop up and knew when I was home. She'd call mum and, oh, it's Cameron up too. Oh, okay, great. Yep. Oh, well, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. And, but it was quite, but I was on there from the very beginning of that system, of that passport system when I was rowing. And even still up until, I mean, obviously now I'm tested for both sports, but I never ever got taken off the rowing one. I mean, it's only been a few years since I actually had a rowing test as well. Like I was getting randomly tested. It was quite
really?
Yeah. Well,
this many years after that, the association.
Yeah, well, I guess because I'm on the National Federation, it's just rowing's listed as a sport still because I never like officially retired or whatever from it. And so, yeah, technically they can still test me for that. But it's interesting now because you have this shift, you know, with supplementation and different things. And I guess the biggest one that, you know, is like the big talking point now, I mean, okay, you've had painkillers, different things, but it's like ketones. You know, and for a long time, we know they've been around a long time. You know, we know they've been around for, I don't know, 10, 12 years or something. Yeah. Guys have been experimenting off and on. I was first made aware of them. Nike, you know, presented some to me, the HVMN ones back in 2019. I couldn't even get a bottle down, you know, it was so vile. And we kind of scrapped it. And then, and also it was sort of like a bit taboo, you know, like no one really knew where the gray line and whatever was. And then now, but as we know, you know, in the last couple of years, it's become, well, in the peloton, it's quite rife. I know Tim O'Donnell's a big proponent. He's been on the show.
Sponsored by Delta G, I think.
Another one of the big companies. And so there's been this sort of shift to now a couple of the teams have actually come out and said, okay, we're sponsored by X brand and I don't know. There's quite a number of different brands. And which means that all of a sudden that has sort of passed the ethical point. But for a long time, that was like a top secret because no one really, it kind of gives you an idea of how, you know, fragile everyone was on this whole anti-doping thing because you weren't cheating. They weren't illegal. They were verified. They were fine, but no one would talk about it.
Interesting.
You know?
Yeah, I thought that, was it Ineos? There was a team that was sort of, you know, testing and experimenting with this and using it in races.
That was interesting because they said it was Ineos, but when I was sent them in 19, Tim said, listen, like we're not doing that. You know, we don't do that here. And that was like, okay, well, they taste horrible, so that's fine. But then, you know, the last couple of years and to be honest, I wasn't presented with it from the team, but I became aware of certain groups within the team were on trial programs with it. And I've been racing and seen other teams pulling them out of their pocket. I mean, I remember
mid-race.
I was riding on the front with Tim de Klerk from Quickstep and he pulled out one of the HVMN bottles. You know, I remembered it and cracked the top and hoofed it down. I was thinking, whoa, how'd you do that? But they believe it's quite a wonder drug. You know, I mean, it's got a bunch of different, you know, functions, cognitive and obviously ability to utilize your fuels and everything better. I personally started using it while I've been here in this camp just to get my own understanding of it, you know, away from the team and away from to learn a bit about it. The HVMN one, which is now a very different formula, which is much more palatable. And I guess I find that, you can, it almost does feel like I can see why everyone kept it a secret because you feel like you can train harder, you know, like you feel like you're on the limit, like, you know, but all of a sudden you can still do it, you know, whereas before you felt like you would blow up, you know, like you start that interval and you think, right, I don't know if I'll get through this one. And sure enough, it's too much. Whereas all of a sudden now you've still got that bit. And every day you get to your rest day and you're like, you know what, like, I'm not that tired. Like, I mean, last week, I had a long run. I was telling you about, you know, I've been communicating with Ken Rideout and I thought, you know what, I think I'll run a marathon today. So
Ken has that
it has
effect.
that ability. So I go out and I ran, and I have a bit of a caveat. I grabbed the dog for the last 3 or 4K to slow it right down so that I don't, so I ran like 2:48 pace for 38, 39K, grabbed the dog and jogged in at like 6-minute K pace. So we did a 2:54. So just a nice cruisy little marathon. And normally that would, you'd feel pretty average. The next day got up for my easy day. It was beautiful. Got on the gravel bike, ended up, going for a swim. So 4.5 hours later, I get home. And then the next day I was doing threshold efforts on the bike, and to think that like you could, train at that level, like I couldn't fathom doing that even before Kona.
It does feel like it's in this weird liminal space between what's okay and what might not be okay.
Exactly. But that's my point with this. Yeah. Exactly. With the ketones, it's like, and we've had a number of years where people have been very unsure of it to the point where it's kept secret.
Right.
Whereas
like
all
even
of a sudden,
though it's legal, no one will talk about it.
Exactly. It's like almost like the world's best kept secret, in sport. And it's amazing. But now, and I don't know if people are coming out about it because they're like, well, we're actually way ahead of the research now with it, and we're comfortable to tell people about it so they can use it that way. But we're actually using it in this capacity.
Well, it's only recently
it's the most widely talked about thing.
Yeah, and it's something that only in the past year has become commercially available.
Yeah, exactly. And that's been a big barrier to it. I mean, most of them are incredibly expensive, and I think that's like HVMN's different. Is they're trying to make it so it is accessible to people with a different, formula, I guess, that is cheaper to create. And time will tell how that goes. I mean, it's probably the only way it will become widespread is if it becomes affordable and accessible to people, where they can buy it at the supermarket. And, now you got to go and you got to probably get online. You got to actually maybe do some research because it has that stigma attached to it. But I mean, it's crazy. I mean, obviously, like with anything new, there's always like studies and everything, and it seems to be able to benefit everything. So anyway, with sport, all of a sudden we've transcended to a point where, okay, we've got stuff that we know is legal, yet we don't know if we should say anything about it, which is quite mind-boggling when you think back to how sport used to be. So I think that's a positive,
Right.
And hopefully not a signal of, are we pushing again to like,
are we going back?
Are we going
into
back
the darkness?
Like, okay, ketones are fine, but what's then next? Like people thinking, okay, if that's helping that, and what can we keep pushing the boundary? And I know with our team, we've felt like other teams have been at the forefront of these, particularly ketones and research and use, and we've been apprehensive because of the stigma and sort of left behind for a period, and obviously felt like we need to get on board, So yeah, the sport definitely took a big hit.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think it's great that everyone is so conscious about. Now we're conscious about stuff that's perfectly legal.
Let's take a beat and really try to understand what this is before we just say yes.
Yeah. I mean, collagen was another one. Years ago, it was like, is that okay? Is it not? It's, and all of a sudden now that's everywhere.
Do you have to be real? I mean, obviously you do. You have to be super conscious of everything you put in your body.
Yeah.
Do you have a supplement regimen, or do you have to make sure everything's NSF and all of that so that you don't end up with a, some kind of like
tainted
false
thing.
Positive tainted situation?
Absolutely. I mean, I just make sure it's, I'm not sure there's a little logo that I know to look for.
Yeah, it's like a little
verified
circle
sport
NSF.
or something.
Yeah, I think so. Right.
Yeah. And I mean, to be honest, this is something else my wife is holistic nutrition, so she's big on food, and that being everything. And up until recently, that's been the big focus for us, is trying to give me everything through that. But we've done some research now, and for example, collagen, for the joints, especially I am 39, so I am getting older. Not that I'm doing more than I've ever done, but I need to stay on top of it. So that's something that I've implemented. Vitamin C just purely for, immunity. I just don't want to get sick. And I don't know if it's placebo, but I find whenever I'm religious with just a couple of vitamin C a day, I'm able to stay, healthy. Obviously now the ketones, and that seems to be, having some benefit. And then, one of my the companies I'm involved with, Momentous, they have a sleep pack, which we're traveling a huge amount. Going against your psychotic rhythm and everything else, like trying to manage that process is really important. I think to longevity in the sport, all the time changes, but also to get the most out of your performance. But I've also found that because of its effectiveness with that, and I felt I've been able to travel better the last sort of few months that I've been using it. When I have a hard day and I want to make sure I get a good night's sleep, I have that too. But, I wake up and, it's all natural. And that's the great thing about Momentous. Everything's all natural, etc. So even in our household, my wife, who was, very much against, numbers and chemical, all this sort of stuff, we've started to devise, a bit of a protocol of different things, because there's enough science out there that, suggests that it's potentially good for you to get the most out of yourself.
Yeah. The Momentous Sleep Pack, I think it's called Sleep Elite, I think is what it's called. I use that, and, they're a supporter of the show, and I know Jeff and all of that. We're stoked to be working with them, and I really love their products. So I use that as well. But there's also like the Huberman protocol, which is all, like the L-theanine and all. So I'll take that occasionally, but then I get crazy dreams. I don't know if that happens to you. No, it start to weird me out.
No, I used to back in the old days when we had like temazepam and Stilnox and crazy things like that with like the cycling team. But even that stuff is not out there anymore. It's melatonin's about as extensive as it gets from the team. And then of course, your basic like protein. I mean, for me, like that's a big one. Like that really, especially I generally actually have it between a session. I don't have it at the end of the day. Because generally whenever I finish one thing, I've still got something else. And in the morning, I'll brew up. I've got an American type coffee maker at home, and I make a big pot, and I have a cup or two before I head out for training. And then if I've got to run or swim or something in the afternoon, I get home, I throw the frozen banana, I throw the protein or the recovery powder in there. Nice, good scoop of very healthy Nutella, natural of course, and as the base, some ice. I'll use the coffee, and if it's later in the day, I might use almond milk or rice milk or something else. But it's like a protein bomb, I call it. And so I'm getting my, I'm starting the recovery process from the session I did before, but I've still actually got another one to go. But I'm getting a boost from the
recovery and the stimulant. And I know, like, we started this podcast at like 5 o'clock, and you drank an espresso. Which is a bold move.
Well,
but you probably what did you already do today? So you went out and rode with G all day today, right?
Yeah, we did 4.5 hours. I did a couple of, as I said, a couple of sort of zone 3 efforts, which, zone 3 is around that 150 to 160 sort of heart rate. So, as I said to G, I said, it's sort of like, it's not hard, but it's not easy. It's in that middle zone. It's sort of like annoying because you're kind of holding back, but not too much. It's actually a bit easier to go a bit harder. So I ended up doing a couple of 20 minutes is around 410 watts, and then shot home, put on the running shoes, and did a couple of 2.5K around 320, 330 pace, a bit of, cruisy jogging in between that, ran a bit over 15K in an hour, 15.5K. So that was,
and that's
that
sort
was
of
today.
a typical.
Yeah, it was about 5.
Situation.
Well, it was about 5.5 hours in total. Yeah.
So how does that work with Garrett? Like, does that fuck with his head? Because this is a guy who's won the Tour de France, and you're the guy who's training with him, but you're doing more by going out after the training session that you do with him and then going to swim or run.
So this was something we didn't get to, but Tim Kerrison, I think he's a mastermind, because that kind of happened at first. And in 18, and then after the first week, and obviously Froomey figured it out pretty quick, in 17 when we were together. So what happens is they just do more. So G, when we came out here in 18, which was the first time we really trained just one-on-one, after about a week, I said, "Oh, mate, I'm just running a bit late this morning." And he's, so anyway, when we got there, he's, "Oh, everything okay?" I was like, "Yeah, no, fine. I just had swimming." And he just didn't, he's like, you what? So all of a sudden the next day, he was up, an hour and a half, 2 hours earlier and on the bike.
This will not stand.
This is not going to stand. And then every time I said, okay, I'm finished now, he's like, I'm going to just go up here. Right. So even today, we got to Sunset. He said, I'm actually going to go up behind the Palisades to that one-way climb and back. But I'd already said, no, I'm going home to get my shoes on. So I couldn't do the extra with him plus the run. So, and there's definitely been, Tim Kerris, I think has been a bit of a mastermind, and all the guys I train with, now the younger guys, Tom Pidcock, Magnus Sheffield, etc. They all, okay, well, Tom, for example, he in Andorra, we get, the main town, and then it sort of splits. There's up the French Valley and up the Spanish Valley, and I live on the Spanish sort of valley side, and that's where the pool is. And so to then get over to the French side, you either keep going up there, or you have to climb a big mountain pass, like climbing up and over Latigo, for example. A good 1,000 meters. What's that? 3,500 foot climb.
Yeah.
So Tom will say, I'll just come past the pool with you, because then he's actually got to go past the pool and then all the way up and over the climb before he gets home. So it's I think it's good for them.
Yeah, who's going to get the last word in? Basically.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And it's as long as we're all performing, that's the main thing.
I love that you guys are like cruising around LA. Like I think this is a drum that I'm always beating, but I just think it's the most underrated place to train. I mean, maybe it's not Andorra, but when you look at triathletes and how many people are in Boulder, and I was joking with Timothy O'Donnell, like, you guys are all in your garages and in your basements, like on treadmills, and it was like 84 degrees here today.
Boiling today. Yeah.
Incredible.
For me, I said to the guys, and Frumi's obviously come out, a couple of years, the COVID year, he was here with me.
And like, and whole teams will, Colombia, like just down the way here, like the hotel would just get, world, teams from the tour would come out and spend a month or a couple of weeks. I
say to the guy, I mean, it's the wow factor here, people don't, and that was the big reason why Tim was pushing another part with me with G, because I'd lived here. I knew my way around. So from day one, we were able to go and train. If you don't know the place, you'd get to LA and go, all right, where do I go?
Right. You wouldn't know. Like, it's not obvious that it's a good place to train.
But once you get out there, like today, I just up on Saddle Peak, there's 4 different sides. We went up every single side. And I think we saw about 3 cars, and one of them was the guy following us, Marco. So it's just, it's impossible to explain it with one of the most densely populated cities in the world that you can see, and then at the moment after the rain and the wind, you can see all out to the Catalan, like you almost feel like you can see Hawaii. I mean, you just see, it's just the wow factor is nuts. But the quality of the climbing and the training is, obviously, to bring him up, but Lance, he was the only one I know of that spent time here training in the summer, or in the winter,
I think that's because he was dating Sheryl Crow.
It was, he had reasons to be out here. But still, he was obviously really smart, he knew where to go. And the weather, you get up in the morning, you never have to question, can you do this? Okay, we've had like 2 days of rain and it was Armageddon, but you never have to question it. And that is the hardest thing for me here is a rest day, because again, you feel like you should be doing something. The last thing in the world you feel like you should be doing is resting and doing nothing. But then that's great being here. You can go to Disneyland or go see a game or go do something else. But yesterday, for example, I just was in the Hollywood Hills up and down all day. I did about 70 miles and I didn't leave suburbia.
Right.
And
just going up and down from Mulholland, doing various the roads that go up there.
Up and Sunset Plaza, Stradella, Outpost down the end, Nichols Canyon. There's actually hundreds of them in there. A little one like Loma Vista, like all these hidden little brick walls, but last 10, 15 minutes, like proper climbs, but at 20%.
Right, some good pitch. So they're not going to be as long or as steep as you're going to get in Europe or in Boulder, and you don't have the altitude and all of that, but the trade-off is year-round climate.
Exactly, and especially this time of the year. And, for G and also for me, things have worked out pretty well since we've, do the foundation work here. I think you just get a real leg up by just being able to log those days after days. I mean, that's the key to anything is consistency.
How come more don't live out here, you think?
Yeah, to be honest, I got no idea. I mean, I think it's just a stigma attached with the place. Like it just isn't for that. And so I guess with regard to professional cycling, though, we're in Europe, and we have to be, and most guys are European based. But it's funny you say it because there's actually a couple of guys in the World Tour now that are actually from here. Sean Quinn with EF and Kevin Vermaak, he's from down in Long Beach. So not quite, but Sean Quinn, he grew up up in the Hollywood Hills on Mulholland there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he knows all those roads like the back of his hand. And so they're young. They're only just going to the World Tour. They're both very good. And it could be, they could be the catalyst for, other particularly Americans, setting up a base here and using it as when they're not in Europe. Mm-hmm. But and then triathletes, same sort of thing. I don't know. It just doesn't have the culture. I mean, Chris McCormick was here for a while, but that's really all I know of.
Well, he would come, so like 10, 12 years ago, he would come out and he would stay in Hidden Hills, some family there. Like maybe the same people. They open up their home and he would stay there. And then Terenzo also, Bozzoni would come out. Yeah. And I would swim with those guys every day and train with them.
Oh, wow.
Like we would swim at the Calabasas swimming. That's like my local pool, the Calabasas swim center. And I would work out with those guys, and they were the only ones. Yeah. And we would have the same conversation. Yeah. But I think if the one thing that's missing is a 50-meter outdoor pool, like if out here in Agora or whatever, if they put something like that in, it would attract, a lot.
Yeah. I mean, there's one obviously out of Pasadena.
I love that pool, but that's so
it's
far
a big hike
to drive from the Santa Monica Mountains.
And the college out here, they got it set up in yards a lot of the time. And I really don't know. Yeah. I mean, because to me, this place is just, it's just so stimulating. Mm-hmm. And endurance sport is, I won't say hard because I love it, but it is. There's times when it's like, especially in Andorra, it's cold in the morning, it's dark, and it's tough to get dressed and roll out the door. I mean, once you get out there, it's like fresh mountain air and altitude and, all the guys around. This is like during winter, obviously summer, it's beautiful, but here, you just can't wait to get out. Where am I going to go? Yeah. It's like not a case of, I have to go this. It's like, it's hard to choose. The options are that endless of everywhere where you want to be. That it's actually difficult to choose where to go. Like running, like my marathon the other day, hardest thing was trying to figure out which part I'm going to add first and when am I going to go down to the beach and do the Rocky Run part and up to Muscle Beach and then up around Brentwood and, like trying to it's just great. I love it here.
I love that you love it. I do want to ask you what you've learned. Like how does what you know or what you learned as a rower contribute to your cycling and your triathlon and vice versa? Like how does your expertise in all of these various disciplines inform like how you train and race? There has to be some alchemy between all of those sports that make you kind of a more informed, experienced athlete.
Yeah, well, definitely in rowing, learning how to get the most out of a team because it's even more extreme than cycling. Because if you go off on your own tangent, the boat won't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. And one thing I was very good at in rowing, I may never have been the best guy. I was very good at rowing with other people. We do a thing called speed order trials where seat racing, where they just change one guy. So it might be a double or a four and they'll put two together and pull him out and put him with him and you get a ranking. And I would always win that. And it's because I didn't have an ego. I could feel what the other guy was doing, adapt to that. A lot of guys would get in, just do their thing. And that was fine if they were with me because I could adapt. But when they get in with someone else they're meant to be great with, that completely sucks. So in cycling, being able to identify, when guys are on the edge or when you need to give someone a bit of a pep me up or a bit of self-belief or whatever else, because as I said, everyone's quite capable. So I think that part of rowing, has been a great thing to learn. And then I guess as far as how it's helped me in Ironman, I think just that ability to do those big days in training. Like I said, I learnt that from rowing. I used to But not only did I do the 6 hours, I did it in 3 different things. Like I said to you, I'd go rowing, I'd go to the gym, I'd go for a ride, or I might go for a run. So I've been doing that forever. It's not like I just started it. You know, I mean, the things that I believe the things I draw on now are things I did as like a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid. You know, the foundation was set. And I've just been able to draw into that, you know, with anything that I've done over that period of time. So I'd say in rowing, okay, you've got the natural things, pushing yourself, hurting yourself, you know, training hard, the discipline, you know, of, you know, with rowing, you have no choice but to turn up to training because otherwise the boat doesn't go on the water.
Right.
So
there's other guys there that can't train if you don't show up.
Punctuality, like we say, we're going to be together at this time. That's where we are. And I'm always, you know, there's guys that are like, oh yeah, I'm 10 minutes late. And I'm like, and I get a bit edgy about that. I mean, not enough, but you calm down, you say something to them. But to me, that's not acceptable because in rowing, you can't get on the water. Whereas in cycling, obviously, it's like whatever, you know, have another coffee and wait, you know. So that's some, you know, the discipline side of it is great to learn and not to let anyone down. And I guess I was speaking to someone recently about, you know, in rowing, every race is a big race and important. You know, like you don't race a lot, you train a lot, and then you get your national championships, you get your selection trials. We got to make the national team. You go to the World Cups and the World Champs. Like they're all big. In cycling, you have
you're racing all the time,
and you got to be able to. And a lot of the time, like that tour next week, UAE, for example, you know, 3 or 4 of the days are sprint days, and we're sort of there with a GC team for the climb. So it's like, okay, let's just not crash, save some energy. Because tomorrow we've got to freaking absolutely feed it to her. You know, there's a team time trial or whatever. So getting that around your head that it's not that way was actually a challenge for me and I used to crash a lot, I guess, because every day I was desperate. But in triathlon, it's wonderful that I learned that skill because every time I race a triathlon, it's important. You know, I want to win. You know, I'm there to perform, you know, and so I'm used to, I've got the experience of that from rowing, you know, it's like everyone matters. And I never go to a race. I never want people to come and watch and go, oh God, Cameron didn't even try, or, you know, this, like, I want everyone to go, wow, that was great to watch him, no matter what the result, you know?
Yeah. That's really interesting. I mean, I think what I take from your example or kind of what inspires me about your path is that, you know, it's really about the enthusiasm that you have. Like you're in love with what you do, right? Like it's so clear. Like you're so excited. Like you're not like, oh, I got to get up and do that. Like you're looking forward to whatever punishment you're going to dole out on yourself tomorrow, right? Like you can't wait.
I can't.
You know, and that's cool because you've been doing it for so long. And as somebody who's been, you know, at the highest level of sports since like, 2004 or something like that? Like the fact that
I was
still
world champion in 2003.
Okay. We'll add a year.
01 was my first worlds.
Okay. We'll throw a couple more years on there.
22. Yeah.
But all right. So even more impressive then. You know, I don't want to shortchange you.
No.
And you're still getting better and you're still improving.
Yeah.
But I think that's a function of how much you're enjoying yourself, which I think gets lost, you know, and probably I think a lot of professional athletes, after they've been in it for a while, they just, it's easy to get cynical or to kind of lose what got you excited about being in the sport to begin with. And somehow you've been able to hold on to that.
Yeah. But as back to what we said before, I've been very fortunate with the people I'm surrounded with. They don't really allow me to, and they don't really allow me to think in any other way. You know, I mean, Tim Kerrison is never like, oh God, we're starting to fall off here. We need to do this to try and keep you up there. We need to keep you in the game. It's all, okay, we've got to get this swim block in. We've really got to figure this out. Okay, you've been making excuses for however long, right? We've finally got this 50-meter pool. Let's go. You know, let's go and do these big miles because that's all you got to do. It's really simple. And Brett Kirby at Nike, you know, the fascinating thing last year, they said, listen, you know, we got an idea. What do you think about LA Olympics? And I was like, yeah, what do I think? I think it's fantastic. It's 2028. He said, yeah, you'll be 44. how about you try and go back to rowing?
I was going to get to this. But go ahead. Yeah.
And I said, far out. Okay, yeah, I hadn't really thought of that. But they were like, wow, it'd be great to like bookend your career with, with that sport. And it's such a vast, gap in between. And I said, okay, well, I'll be 44. Now, another thing is Tom Brady and I are both born on the 3rd of August. Obviously, he's older than me, but we're born on the 3rd of August. So since he started all this longevity stuff, I've always had like 45 as that, this number.
Mm-hmm.
And so Nike did a bit of research and, it seems that physiologically, as long as you look after yourself, you haven't had injuries, etc., you shouldn't really decline until then. There's a lot of evidence, particularly it's like your VO2, for example, is the first thing to get hit and it won't really go until then. So the first thing that could potentially be affected would be swimming and running, which are the two things that I could still improve the most in because I just simply haven't done them for that long. And then cycling actually comes even later.
Right.
So, and they said the reason most guys get to mid-30s, early 30s and think it's time to stop is they've been doing that for 20 years. Like you change your mind like you change your underpants about sport. So, you never give yourself a chance to have got complacent or, rest. I mean, even look at you now, you got into Ironman. Now all of a sudden you wanted to throw cycling back in there and you're constantly trying to figure out how to be better, how to figure it out. And so, if we threw rowing at you, it would only do the same thing. You'd be like, right, I'm back in the boat. Okay, how can all these years of every other sport apply to making that happen? And it sounds like coastal rowing will be part of the Olympics, and they call that old man's rowing.
Right. This is like, again, on that like Forrest Gump thing, like everything's just showing up with perfect timing. Like, yeah,
potentially.
That's the sport. Like, because all the young gunners are not going to go for that. They want to be in the sculls, right? So
most likely
it opens it up.
Yeah.
For you.
You'd think the first Olympics, if there's a shot at breaking. I mean, G and I talked about this because he's always joked about wanting to do Ironman. And he wanted to do it competitively, but then he's seen what's happened in the sport. And, I said, mate, look, if I'm honest with you, if you'd done it when I started, that was, I guess, kind of low hanging fruit. I came in and was able to kind of change things and all that really, everything. When I learned to run, there was a lot of great cyclists before, but no one could run. But when I learned to run, they all learned to ride, and still run as quick to stay ahead of me, and the low hanging fruit is kind of gone from the sport now. You got these, with all due respect, but, I was able to make my way in at a time when there was an opportunity to do that. And so now G's more like, I'm just going to enjoy. When I stop cycling, I'm going to do Ironman Wales, maybe qualify for Kona, maybe be an age group, do as well as I can. And who knows from there. And I guess that's the same thing with coastal rowing. It'll be the first Olympics that it'll be in. So we'll see. It might not be as competitive, but at the end of the game,
it's longer, right? Like, what is the distance?
Yeah, like 5-6K. So it's like 25 to 30 minutes, depending on the weather. On the conditions. And obviously with now having some open water swimming understanding and, with the rowing, I've got access to obviously the America's Cup crew. So I could go and maybe spend some time with them to learn a bit about, currents and water and, wind and, different things that I never thought of before. I guess I potentially do have the resources around me to give that a nudge.
That's insane.
But we'll see.
Because I didn't even think of the whole Ineos thing and how they can, come to your, aid with all of that. Like, that's insane.
I could build me a boat.
That would just, you have to do that. Like, it would just be absolutely fucking legendary.
Yeah. I won't rule it out.
I definitely won't rule it out. It would just be indisputed, legendary status.
Yeah, and being here in LA, that's going to be, and I think once we get through Paris next year, and I'm not really, I haven't given up on, obviously with my role in the team, there's always a role on the Australian team. And we've discussed it in the past few years, even leading up to Tokyo. I was in the sort of the group, but, I was a few guys away from getting picked. And but the Worlds each year, since what I did last year, particularly in Roubaix, I guess that kind of reminded everyone, that I can play that role and at the highest level. And also maybe I could help bring the team together a bit, obviously national teams, it can be quite fragmented with different trade teams and they all come together. So who knows? So you never know what might happen with Paris, but it's definitely not like an objective. My goal in the next 2 years is to be the best teammate I can be, with the guys this year. And I mean, I take that year by year, whether I'm going to race again. As I said, I came very close to being happy not to do it this year, but the team sort of encouraged me to keep going, and I'm happy I made that call. I really want to win in Nice. Obviously, it's at the end of the day, it is a world championship and it's an opportunity to win. And if I can pull that off, obviously I want to confirm it in Kona, and then we'll see.
Right.
I can't see myself bidding Ironman. I think even if I did coastal rowing, I'd probably want to do both. But they probably complement each other exceptionally well. Mm-hmm. So, we'll see.
And then longer term, I mean, like the multi-sport ultra world, you would just absolutely dominate that.
Well,
if you turned your sights on that.
After that, the pod with Colin, I started following. I think actually, the World Championship in Kona was on around that time.
You're talking about Ultraman?
Yeah.
I was there. I crewed an athlete at that race.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
past year.
I did take note of that and looked at that.
You would absolutely crush that race.
Well, yeah, I kind of feel that, and what they're doing is incredible. But I kind of feel like, someone, Tim O'Donnell, or,
somebody legit has to step up and tackle that thing.
Or Ben Hoffman, and they're going to blow it out. They're going to do something a bit like what's happened in Ironman. I mean, it's
inevitable.
It's not critical to the guys doing it. They're amazing. I mean, they're at the best in the sport, but there's going to be something that'll push them, like has happened in Ironman, and it's sort of been a natural evolution of getting bigger and bigger. And all of a sudden now Ironman is, like you say, it's like a race. We're sprinting almost. So what's going to challenge us next? Oh, okay, doing it twice.
Right. I mean, it's starting to change. This year, Leanne DeCave and Dee Dee Griesbauer
had a bit of a race.
And Dee Dee was amazing.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
I think she's 52, so, and still her performance was unreal.
Yeah.
But to get somebody more in their prime to step in and do that, I think it's only a matter of time.
It definitely, I like to look at that as well.
Yeah. You should.
Yeah.
You're not headed back to the real estate fund anytime soon.
No. As I said, that's going to be more.
We love you, but I think that seat might be fallow for a little bit longer.
No, he knows that, and he'll be a big support. Like he said to me, your role in this whole fund is walkabout. If you can take us on your walkabout, one thing that I've been, I've always, I've, not to pat myself on the back, but I tend to always put everyone else first, and that's great. Like I said in rowing, like I always want to be the bottom guy in the team. I always want to make everyone else better. I'm always happy for everyone else when they win. That doesn't always work out best for you.
Right.
In the sports that I've done.
The fact that you're so committed to Kona tells me that you also, desire, it's
absolutely.
Like you want your moment.
And in that one though, it doesn't really affect everyone else. It's like, it's just me, but obviously with the team, even with Ryan. And so I guess finance has always drawn me in because I think, well, here's an industry where you can, want what's best for everyone else. You want to help them make money. And then that's also going to benefit you quite handsomely. So it's definitely something that I think will fit nicely. As I said, and the fact that everything I've done, I've always wanted to be around the best people or found myself around the best people and wanted to succeed. I mean, until I take my last breath, I hope I maintain that attitude with everything I do.
Yeah. Well, we got to wrap this up here, but before we do that, I think it would be helpful to just leave the listener or the viewer with a few thoughts on helping them with their own kind of fitness endurance journey. I mean, I think it's easy to hear your story and find it inaccessible, but you're racing, when you do these Ironmans, you're with all the amateurs, you're seeing what everybody's doing, what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong. Yeah. So for the aspiring triathlete or endurance athlete or somebody who's training for their first marathon, like based upon your experience and kind of what you see other people doing, like what are some, things to focus on and things to maybe not focus on, or common mistakes that you see?
Yeah. It's funny because a friend of mine, I ride with him out here, Stuart Walton, and his wife, Kelly, they're actually training for a half Ironman. You know, it's like, and they've never done one. And we've had a lot of these conversations lately. And I always say the same thing to people: focus on the swim. And I seem very hypocritical because I'm not the best at it myself, but and I don't seem to apply the time to it that I should. But if you don't get out of that swim well, the rest of the day is a really long day. So if you're a great swimmer, okay, then you can move to the bike, and then once you can get through the bike, then you can start thinking about the run. But to me, like, the biggest thing is, and I think people neglect it, like, oh, I'm not a good swimmer. It's like, well, honestly, the more time you spend and you just work on that so you can just get through that comfortably, you're going to mean that you can actually utilize the things you are strong at, much better throughout the rest of the race. So that's always my biggest piece of advice. And then another thing, we discussed was, he was talking to me about the boots and the gun, all this sort of stuff. And I mean, honestly, like, especially if that stuff takes time. I mean, I know the Norwegians talked about it really well, like about massage, but it's so true. I mean, all that stuff takes time. It can often take time away from things that you'd prefer to be doing. And does it really help that much at that level? Probably not,
Right.
And not to crap can on any of that stuff, but
especially when you're time crunched and you have a life, like,
exactly.
You're not living, the life that Gustav and Christian have.
No. And
even you don't have the time they have. Like, you have a wife and a child.
Exactly. I when I heard them, I was like, wow, I remember being at the Institute. I don't say I miss those days. I love what I've got now, but yeah, I could just picture them. Yeah, you can see it. But, and people feeling bad that I haven't, done my boots or my, ball or my whatever it is, like, make sure you have a good meal, eat well, I mean, take an extra time to do that, or just, if you're watching TV, just have a stretch, or, whatever, like, work those little bits of extra pieces in, around, just making sure the rest of your life's going along well, because if you let all those little bits and pieces get on top of you, that'll then get on top of your training and the rest of life, and to make it, very difficult. So I'd say, really simplify things, but then I just go back to what you asked me about what separates, okay, Sun Yang was a controversial example, but, Fumi G, etc., Christian, the guys, it's, okay, I'm not saying go out and run a marathon, but maybe at least spend 3 hours on your feet walking and jogging or something, before you have a crack at an Ironman one day, and ride, definitely try and ride 180 kilometers, like, just to you can see how it feels, and obviously swim the distance. Like, just go through the motions. You'd be amazed how much confidence that will give you, knowing that you've done it, other than getting there on the start line. I mean, there'll be times when it's just not possible because of your lifestyle, and you do what you can. But, if you can make the time just for that, even if it's just one, and I'm not saying do it all in one day. I'm saying, one weekend, okay, I'm going to do race distance. Okay, next weekend, I'm going to ride the race distance. The next weekend, I'm going to hike for 3 hours. Just like, practice what you got to deal with, and I know that's all sounds simple, but unless you get the foundations of it all right, like the training, the intervals, the power meters, the heart rate monitor, all that stuff, it's really largely irrelevant, what I mean? And even then, once you get to our level, a lot of the time it's irrelevant. You're just you got to go that speed, and you got to figure out how to do it. But yeah, I mean, swimming is a big one, and finding a great group. I mean, everyone says it, but finding a squad is crucial. I mean, I swim a lot on my own, but that's more because of time, and when I have to fit training in. But when it works to swim with a group, I mean, it's by far the best way to go, and especially if you're learning, and it just keeps you accountable, and because you can waste a lot of time if you don't have a structure when you're trying to manage 3 different sports. So that accountability helps a huge amount. So, just those basics. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. I mean,
if there's anything specific.
The corollary that I would add to that is simply making it sustainable and trying to make sure that you're enjoying it, right? Because otherwise, like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, it should be fun and not like overly, it should be hard, but not burdensome and not approached in a way that's going to capsize the other things in your life that are important to you. And on the topic of swimming, I think, what I see is, the broader issue is we all like to train our strengths and we don't really want to deal with the stuff we're not good at, so we kind of avoid it, right? And in triathlon, that's often swimming because people didn't grow up swimming. They're not that good at it. So they're intimidated, whatever. And so they either avoid it. And then when they go to do it, they're so intent on getting their fitness in that they won't take the time to learn and understand technique. So I've seen so many triathletes in the pool, like, they got to get their Ks in. They have their workout, but their form is terrible. And I'm like, you should just stop completely and like start over and invest in really understanding how to improve your technique, because you're literally, you could get as fit as you want. You're still just wasting all this energy and you're not moving forward, but because they're time crunch, you're like, I can't afford that time or that investment, but that would pay a massive dividend.
Yes. Swimming is the one sport that you can, by having the too gung-ho approach, it can really backfire on you. There's obviously some examples in our sport of guys, they've been getting better at swimming for 10 years and they train 30, 40. At least when I don't swim well, it's because I haven't swum.
But shame on you for being Australian and not having swimming be your strongest of the three. But how dare you?
In triathlon, it's always, that's the starting point. Get that right, and like you say, just learn how to float. Learn how to comfortably get through that swim, and from there on, you're worry about the rest.
Right on.
All
right, man. Well, we got to pull the plug on this thing. Okay. And you got to get to the UAE.
You're
flying tomorrow?
No, next week.
Oh, Tuesday. Next week. Oh, so you're around still.
Yeah.
All right. Cheers, man. Thanks, dude. That was super fun.
Honored to be on here.
Appreciate it. So if people want to follow you in the upcoming season, where's the best place to find you? On Instagram?
Yeah, that's all I've got, actually. I don't have anything else. So
there you go.
Yeah, I'm okay at social media. I have a decent following, I guess. So follow the team and follow me, and
there you go. So it's at, what is the account? At Cam Wurf?
I think it's CJ Wurf.
Oh yeah, it is. Right. Yeah. I'll link it up in the show notes and all that good stuff.
I appreciate that.
Cool, man. This was super fun.
Yeah.
You're welcome back. And if you ever want to ride really slow when you're here,
hey, we've got to go for that swim.
Happy to do it anytime, man.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Cool. Cheers.
Cheers.